This meeting of the Judson Board of Trustees is hereby called to order at 5:31 p.m. I'm very pleased that you have taken the time to join us this evening. In compliance with State Government Code on Open Meetings, tonight's agenda has been appropriately posted. These proceedings are being audio and video recorded and will become part of Judson's permanent legal record. In order that the tape adequately reflects these proceedings, please silence your mobile devices and refrain from talking while others are speaking. Once again, I extend to each of you a sincere welcome from the entire school board. Thank you for your interest in Judson ISD. We have established a quorum, and I will call roll. Oops, maybe. Okay, you mark your attendance. Okay, we have all 7 members present. All right, let me record that. Okay. All right, well, welcome to our strategic roundtable for fall, where we're going to reset and recalibrate. Before we begin, I would like to review kind of where we're at in that governance cycle. So we approved our new governance manual, which kind of guides how we're doing everything with our board. In July, we had all of our community meetings. Sorry, Dr. Dixon's looking at my cute little pen.
I don't have a pen.
It's purple. Here, if you'd like a real pen, ma'am, there you go. In July, we had our community meetings where we received some amazing stakeholder input, and we appreciate everyone who came out to those meetings. Then as a board, we took that input and we approved our new mission, vision, and our portrait of a graduate. So now kind of the next step in the governance cycle is for the board to take a look at our data and to reset our goals for the year. So we have been using a balanced scorecard for the last 3 years. There's a number of districts are kind of moving away from that template because TEA, from those of us who were up at the TEA conference, is definitely leaning more towards a Lone Star governance style in terms of goals and constraints. 2 of our board members are probably pretty familiar with that because we used to be a Lone Star governance district. So in the second half of this meeting, we'll go over some proposed goals and guardrails for the district that have been put together with administration. So thanks to Dr. Tiarina for being here tonight. We got some great training with our last session with you, and we went over how boards develop goals. We went over the requirements of House Bill 3 and House Bill 3 goals. So I appreciate you being here to kind of help us through now doing our own goal setting and be here for any questions or clarifications that we might need. So in terms of how we'll flow through this tonight, we're going to start with the 2026 academic deep dive. Please keep in mind that we got all of this data less than 2 weeks ago, and it is hundreds and hundreds of documents across many, many categories. So thank you to Dr. Saunders and Ms. Orozco and Ms. Gomez for pulling together this much data so quickly, and you'll see a lot of analysis in the presentation that they have. So please be patient with the slide formats and fonts. It was more important to get the data right on the slides and have it ready for tonight than it was to make sure something was 12 or 13 points. So thank you for your grace with the slides this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Saunders and her team to start the academic deep dive. And then once that's done, we'll take a quick brain break if we need it. If not, we'll just roll right into our goal setting. So I'll turn it over to the CNI team.
Thank you so much. Good evening, guys. Board, Madam President, Dr. Dixon. Couple of, I think, housekeeping items just to make sure that we're all on the same page. We briefed you guys last week with a very broad, high-level overview that was really for the public, like for public consumption, just basically the state of the district as far as accountability is concerned. Tonight, we're going to dive in with each one of the content areas through some certain lenses. I think we're going to start with RLA, and I think that'll kind of set our cadence. So I'm just looking for cues from the board on how the pace is. Do we need more information? Do we need less information? And then kind of as we go to each content area, we'll just wait to hear cues from you guys on how y'all would like the pace. Bear with us as we try to figure out if this technology is going to work or not, and then we'll go from there. So first 2 slides are really very similar to what we saw last week. It's the broad overview. Of course, if you remember from last Thursday, we said we are proud to announce that we are currently a C district, back to a C rating. Some information on here specifically about campuses and their current ratings as we go through. Okay, so if we go to the second slide, and I'm assuming that you guys are following along as we go through, so again, help us with the cadence if you need us to slow down or speed up. This basically tells us the breakdown of each campus and where students fall in relationship to what percentage of our students are attending what type of campus. I think one of the things that we want to hone in on as a CNI team, and we would encourage the board to do, is really look at where are the bulk of those low-rated C campuses, those D campuses, and those F campuses, and what percentage of our students in Judson ISD are attending those campuses. And you can see that breakdown in front of you. All right, so the next slide that we have, lots of information on here, so there's just a couple of things that we wanted to point out.
Can you ask questions as we go, or do you have to go there?
We are here for you, so we can do it however you'd like to.
Just
Clarifying on page 2, the 70.6 includes A, B, and C.
Correct?
All together.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Then it's teased out a little bit further.
A, B. Okay.
Correct.
All right, and then we don't have a number for.
Well, it will present itself later in our presentation
Okay.
when we talk about those campuses specifically.
Okay, thank you.
So as we look at this next slide, I want to go back to something that we said on Thursday about celebrating where we are as a C. That's very, very important. But the work tonight is really digging into the data and for the space to understand we have a lot of work ahead of us. We clearly have not arrived. So some of the things that we're going to talk about today is where are those target areas we're looking at specifically for student groups and content area. If you notice the overall accountability, I think it's safe to say in Judson ISD we have wavered back and forth from a C to a D over a cycle of 4 years, right? So our goal moving forward is to leave the D ratings in the past and really grind away at moving that C higher and higher and higher to where, as 5 years from now, what are we looking like? Are we looking like a high B? Are we looking like an A district? That's the goal of tonight's work, is really kind of grinding through and figuring out what those next steps are. We do want to point out some data along the way that will help us talk a little bit more specifically about closing the gaps. So now I want to reference your right side of the slide. When you think about the components that make up accountability, so we have student achievement, we have academic growth, we have relative performance, and we have closing the gaps. The reason why we really want to hone in on closing the gaps is because we're talking about very specific marginalized groups of students. So as we go through the slides tonight, you're going to hear us say and even ask the board questions based on the data. What groups do you think we should be targeting? Which groups do we see lagging behind? Not only lagging behind the students in Judson ISD, but lagging behind the students in Region 20, lagging behind the state of Texas. So we're really going to kind of dig into that. And as we get further into the presentation, we'll define closing the gaps a little bit more. Ms. Stanford, if you notice on the bottom of the slide, that goes to the question that you were asking earlier. That's our distribution there. 3A campuses, 4B campuses, 11C campuses, 7D campuses, and 2F campuses.
it just doesn't show the student number.
Yes, ma'am, we'll get there, I promise. Keep asking me.
Okay.
Yep. All right, so next page, we're just going to kind of skip over and go, if you guys will go 2 more, we're going to go to the district-wide analysis and methodology. This goes to what we were talking about earlier, the components that make up accountability. I would like to draw everyone's attention to number 3, which is student groups, specifically closing the gaps. So what we're talking about with this accountability measure is, are we serving all students of Judson ISD to the best of our ability? So like we said before, we're going to go through each content area, and we will highlight, I think reading is the first content area in here. We'll highlight specifically what those student groups look like as we move forward. But the question we want to keep in the forefront is, are we addressing all the needs of all students in Judson ISD? And if the answer is no, then we need to go back and we need to look at those specific student groups. One thing that you're going to see interesting as we go through is we will see the same student groups rise up and bubble up as we look at every single content area, which means we have a systemic instructional issue in Judson ISD. Good so far? Okay. All right, so we're going to dive into RLA. This is your table of contents. Let's jump into the first one that actually has some data slides on it. So the breakdown for each one of these contents is identical, so thank you. So we'll spend a minute just talking about what this breakdown looks like, because it's going to repeat itself as we get into math, as we get into science, and as we get into social studies. So it's broken down by grade level, and then you'll notice that it's also broken down by those performance levels. Those performance levels are approaches, meets, and masters. And then you guys will also notice it shows us the 24 data, the 25 data, and the 26 data. So as you look at RLA as a whole, you can see in elementary, 3rd through 5th grade, we have great gains. And I would say consistent gains, right? With the exception of approaches in 4th grade. And we'll dive into that a little bit more. I would also like to remind the board that although we do see green in approaches, approaching grade level means the student is just getting to the point where they're ready to access grade level material. Remember, this is basically an end of year test. So we should not feel comfortable saying we have arrived if 60% of our kids are approaching 3rd grade at the end of 3rd grade, right? The goal is really meets and masters. And clearly meets and masters in the language alone identifies it. Meets means I'm meeting grade level. For the next year, I will need little to no intervention. And masters means I have mastered the grade level. And as I transition into the next, I should be firing on all cylinders as long as I have a teacher who grows me within a year. Make sense? Okay.
And before you flip off this slide, put a little asterisk next to on that far left one on 3rd grade meets, because that is a mandatory House Bill 3 goal that you will see later on in the goal setting portion. So as we go through, we'll point out 3rd grade meets in RLA, 3rd grade meets in math, and CCMR, because those are mandatory board goals.
Thank you for that. I also want to point out, you can look at 3rd grade meets, or you can look at 3rd grade masters. You can also look at 4th grade meets. You can also look at 4th grade masters and 5th grade meets and 5th grade masters. That is the trajectory we are looking for. So if you notice the progression from 24 to 25, 26, you will notice that line has that upward trajectory. That's what we want to see for all content, all grade levels, and most importantly, all student groups. So as we start looking at those student groups a little bit more consistently. Our next slide moves us to middle school. So there's a couple of things I think to note when we take a look at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. One place that we want to land is 6th grade specifically, because we just got finished looking at 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And if you remember, 5th grade was green all the way down, approaches, meets, and masters. So the question you might be asking yourself is, then why, right, exactly what happened in 6th grade? And I think there's a couple of things to think about. And whether anyone believes this or not, it is a true story, because I taught middle school for 11 years. The transition from 5th grade to 6th grade, not just instructionally, but social and emotionally, is difficult. When you talk about academics, the reading complexity between the 6th grade test and the 5th grade test is marked. It's very, very clear the reading complexity is up a notch in 6th grade. So imagine for a second that you are a 5th grade student who is approaching at the end of the year, right? You've passed the STAR test in all essence. You have approached grade level. Now you're going into 6th grade, knowing all you did was approach 5th grade. Now we're dropping you into a 6th grade classroom with heightened reading complexity and expecting you to be at approaches, meets, and masters. So there's clearly a disconnect between that 5th grade and 6th grade transition. When you look at 6th grade approaches, for example, this year we scored 58% of our students were at approaches. These same exact kids in 5th grade were at 70% approaches. So I'm referencing the slide previously, right? So think about that cohort of students. I leave 5th grade, 70% approaches. Now I'm in 6th grade the very next year, and all of a sudden I'm down at 58% approaches. So not only did we lose momentum as an entire group or an entire cohort of students, but that is then compounded as these kids move from 6th grade to 7th grade to 8th grade. So really, when you think of like triage in elementary, it's almost like stop the bleed, right? And you guys are going to see that clearly when we get to math. Because let me ask the board this question. In middle school, what grade level are we suffering in math? 7th grade. So you will start to see that creep in when we start looking at 5th grade data and 6th grade data. It's the exact same thing with RLA.
Is the testing
Oh, yeah. Is it more difficult in sixth grade? You said there's a change.
There is. It's the reading complexity of the passages that they're asked to do. So when we had writing as a standalone exam, fourth grade and seventh grade, those students took a reading test and then they took a standalone writing test, right? The two were not incorporated. So when you couple text complexity in sixth grade, along with students now have to read more complex text and analyze it and then write to the text, we start seeing this issue compounding itself. You guys are really going to hear two takeaways tonight as we talk about RLA and as we talk about math. One of the things that we've got to hone in on as a district is what are we doing with that writing component of the RLA test? Because we are so accustomed to the reading test feeling like a standalone, I'm going to read passages and I'm going to answer questions. That's not the way the test is built any longer. Yes, I have to read a passage and yes, I have to answer questions, but now I have to analyze at a much higher level, cognitive level, and I have to be able to put those words into writing and form a constructed response. And that's really where we see students start to drop off, right? So it's no longer just good enough that you can read a passage and answer multiple choice questions. Now you have to actually analyze the text and put it into a response, a constructed response.
So it's a sudden jump, really.
No, I wouldn't say it's sudden. It's there in third grade, it's there in fourth grade, it's there in fifth grade. What I'm saying is if you're struggling in reading, the writing is compounded. So, for example, and I'm just going to be really honest, I'm a fifth grade student who struggles with reading, right? I can plow through a reading passage and with proper tools on how to take a test, I can narrow down 4 multiple choice questions and get pretty close to choosing the right answer. When you add in a short constructed or extended constructed response, that is way past being able to use test-taking strategies to narrow down multiple choice questions. I now have to actually articulate my thinking in the reading, and that's where we start to see students struggle.
So I wonder if some of that could be injected into the fifth grade level instead of...
It is injected as early as kinder. Yeah, I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but it honestly is. And what that could look like is a teacher reading a book to students and students having to tell the teacher what they learned from the text and then start to formulate that into a sentence. Because that's what it looks like when they get into third, fourth, and fifth grade.
It just looks like there's a sudden drop off, so I just wondered if we could take some of the aspects of sixth grade and that level of difficulty and pepper it in.
Oh, absolutely. I see what you're saying. You're talking about taking the text complexity that we see in sixth grade and starting to sprinkle it into fifth grade.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you know, that's a really good point because one of the things that will allow us a little bit more I think control over that is really making sure that the text teachers are selecting are actually on grade level or above. Sometimes as a teacher, there's a text that I fall in love with, right? And I taught it when I was in third grade. When I was a third grade teacher, I fell in love with this text. And all of a sudden, I'm now teaching fifth grade. And what am I using? The exact same text. So sometimes it's just about honing in, are we using that rigorous text in all grade levels? Because we also have to differentiate to meet the needs of our students. If you have a fourth grade student sitting in your classroom who was masters in third grade, then your responsibility as the teacher is to make sure you are giving the student rigorous text, which means it could be on or above grade level.
I had a couple of comments. And again, I appreciate the ability to ask because sometimes the commentary or the questions come after we've talked about a lot of things. So one thing that just for us to think about, almost rhetorical right now, is the idea that we still haven't discussed reuse of facilities. And I say that because I do believe that having potentially an intermediate school for just sixth graders could be beneficial. I've seen that practiced in other districts and it's been really supportive. It allows students to stay focused in sixth grade as they transition to middle school. So we may have an opportunity there. There's obviously a lot of analysis that needs to take place before we do something like that, but I do still believe there is a pathway that may strengthen our ability to serve sixth graders if we isolate them to a campus. That's one thought, no answer right now, 'cause it's not the right agenda item, but just so that we're having some discussion on it. Secondly, the information that you utilize to do BOI, beginning of year, middle of year, end of year, this past year, we were receiving data from those assessments, but they didn't equate to the actual STAR data. So I'm trying to get a better sense is, are there programs out there that can give us a more accurate assessment as to where we are? And so that's a question I wanted to put out there. Don't have to have an answer right now.
No, I
have
appreciate you.
input.
I appreciate you asking that. We use NWEA for the BOI, MOI, EOI. You guys might remember we would stand at the podium and tell you, please remember this does not have a writing component attached to it. So really the only thing that we were seeing was that reading proficiency, right? Reading and being able to answer questions. So I think to your point, our opportunity is to leverage those interim assessments, the ones that TEA brings down to the district, because it does have, it's all encompassing. It does have components for us to really hone in on that. And I think that's the interim coupled with our MAP assessments, I think would give us a more clear picture. But one of the conversations we just had, because we spent all day with the principals today, was really focusing our PLC now to the student work samples. Like, are we measuring the writing consistently? Are we providing that feedback consistently? Are we measuring student writing based on the rubric that TEA gives us? Because honestly, TEA gives us the blueprint to figure out what these assessments are going to look like. We just have to utilize them in the right way. I think we could have done a much better job this past school year of really analyzing those student work samples, and that is a commitment we were very clear about today.
I appreciate that. And I guess my last point, just for consideration as we keep diving through this very important discussion, is that when we had this discussion back in 2018, 2019, we talked a lot about these targets and student populations and all that, and we were aggressive to some degree. But the lesson I learned from that discussion was setting goals that seemed a little bit more aspirational, but more importantly, not setting goals that impacted the classroom, because teachers then will feel a strong sense of responsibility to get to that level. And without increasing our strategic support of them from the board level, I think it could drive down morale. And I kind of, like I said, learned that during our discussion that we had back then. Whatever we decide, I'd like to see some layers on how we're going to be supporting teachers in the classroom to reach these improved or increased projections that we're talking about today. So that's just a general statement. Thank you.
So, and Dr. Dixon, tell me if I'm out of turn or if this is not the place. So I appreciate you saying that, and I want to make the board aware that the process we established tonight was setting goals, district goals. There are a couple of layers between the district goals and where we actually see a student sitting in a classroom. So for example, through the TPES system, which is the principal evaluation system, principals will establish student growth goals for their campus based on their campus-specific data, but measured next to the goals we set tonight. And then every single teacher in Judson ISD does the exact same thing with their T-test, the teacher evaluation system. So every teacher will look at their student data and set their student growth goals based on where their students are after BOY, compared to what the district goal or expectation is. So when we talk about the district level goals, it then looks like, what is the principal doing to achieve those goals? What are teachers doing to achieve those goals? And during those conferences, principals and teachers both will say, and these are the supports and the resources I need in order to achieve this goal. All of that is woven into their evaluation system. I think that's why tonight is so important, is to make sure that we establish those district goals, because honestly, we have principals and we have teachers just foaming at the mouth, waiting to get their student growth goals set. That was okay to say? Just checking, I don't know. So,
Yes, we're
it's
going to dive
absolutely
into the second half where we set goals. There's some stuff in
Yes,
there
ma'am.
about what does this then become and how does it flow down the chain and then back up.
Perfect.
Essentially, so we'll address that a little bit more near the end also. But that was great.
Okay,
preview.
yeah, absolutely. So they are foaming at the mouth. I'm not joking. There is a different feel in Judson ISD this year. we had such an incredible meeting with principals today, and one of the things we talked about is for it to be the 9th day of school and us talking about instruction at the level that we were talking about instruction today is remarkable. The things and the conversations we had today were conversations that we were having last year in October and November. So we're not waiting for BOY data. We are using actionable data from what we received from TEA, and we are making decisions right now about kids and what next steps are, and I think that's an incredible place to be in. I don't want to lose the momentum. So as we switch to high school, we just want to remind you guys, remember what we talked about is one bite-sized action step that we can really focus in on when it comes to RLA is strengthening that writing component. This high school is where you start to see it present. This is where that writing deficiency that's happening in 3rd grade starts to manifest. This is where it bubbles up. So when we look at English 1 and we look at English 2, you can see there is no green on these sheets. Thinking back to 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, almost green all the way across. Then we saw 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We saw some green with some peppering of some red in there. As we get to RLA, as we get to English 1 and English 2, you guys will notice we're red across the board. The writing component in English 1 and English 2 is next level. And if we haven't really established that good protocol as a 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade student, we're going to see it present here year after year after year. Okay, next one we see is our RLA performance pipeline. So basically this story that you see in front of you gives you an idea of where we see not only those leverage points of where we are getting instruction right, but what that looks like as we move through the spectrum of grade level year over year, right? So you'll notice 5th grade and 8th grade. Take a look at those two specifically. The reason why these two are so interesting is they are green at approaches, meets, and masters, but I want you to also notice these are transition years. So there's two things to think about when we talk about transition years. Remember, approaches, we have not arrived. The goal is meets and masters. So when you look at the number of kids that are in meets and masters and 5th grade and 8th grade, right, we're sitting at 53% and then 49% and then 26% and 20% for 5th and 8th grade. What does that transition to as we get to English 1 and English 2? So then the question we might be asking ourselves is, then why are English 1 and English 2 orange and red? It is the writing component. The writing component, yes, it's heavy in 5th grade, and yes, it's heavy in 8th grade, but the difference between 5th, 8th grade and English 1 and English 2 is not only rigor of the text, but it's also the number of constructed responses they're asked to do in English 1 and English 2. The way that it's graded, the rubric is completely different. So if we can shore up writing instruction in those earlier grade levels, we will start to see that perpetuate itself in our English 1 and English 2 scores. One of our favorite slides to look at. So we've talked a lot about how are our students doing in Judson ISD compared to how our students are doing in Judson ISD, right? And that's a great conversation when Judson ISD is a B or A rated district, right? But when we're a D district coming into a C, we need to start measuring ourselves not only to Region 20 districts that look like us, but also how are we doing compared to the state of Texas. So that black through line that you see on every one of these graphs is basically where is the state of Texas and how does Judson ISD compare. So you can tell based on these drop pins, every single one of them is below the state of Texas, which means yes, absolutely, we need to celebrate that we're back at a C, and yes, we saw incredible gains. But compared to the rest of the state, there is a lot of work to do. That's why we started this evening by saying we are incredibly proud of the work that happened for 25-26, but we have not arrived and we've got a lot of work to do. So one thing to think about is our students are highly mobile. We have this conversation all the time, but they're not just highly mobile within Judson ISD, and they're not just highly mobile within Region 20. We are a large military community. So what are we doing for our students who leave San Antonio or leave the state of Texas or go to North Texas? How are they comparing to the rest of the kids in the state of Texas? And I think that you guys can tell by this slide, we have a lot of work to do. This slide is also going to replicate itself in each one of our content areas tonight. It's just hey, FYI, we're doing good work here in Judson ISD, but there's still some work to do when you see us compared to the rest of the state of Texas. The one we just looked at was for elementary. Same exact graphic that you can see 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And then same exact graphic as we get to high school. I think the important...
I think this one,
Yeah.
this one, we were kind of staying in the same spot for the other ones, but this is where we have just lost ground. We've lost ground. Everybody else went up and we went back, and so to lose 10 points of ground, 12 points of ground from the state.
17
minus
in English 2 meets.
Where we would have been a -5, yeah, that is a lot of ground to make up.
I think the other component to think about when you think about English 1 and English 2 is, are we preparing our students for the next level of education? Are they prepared to go into a college English 101 class and perform with kids across the state of Texas, right? So think about that. If I'm choosing to go to school in Texas Tech and the district I just left is 17 points behind the rest of the state, have we put our students at an unfair advantage in that college classroom? When I look at this data, that's the conversation I'm thinking about. Being that I have a sophomore in college, I'm wondering, is my son prepared to be academically competitive with those around the state of Texas? And I think this slide tells us that we've got work to do here in Judson ISD. Okay, so next we have basically our heat map. So this is all students in RLA. So this is 3rd grade through English 2. This is a very, very important slide. Remember, we're focusing on meets and masters. So as you look at those meets and masters components, you will notice we have none in the green. We are yellow, we are orange, we are red across all components in meets and masters. This is an incredibly important slide. I want you to keep this slide in mind because as we go 2 slides forward, we're going to look at those sub-pops that we talked about earlier. Remember, we talked about closing the gaps. Are we doing our due diligence with all students in Judson ISD? So this heat map is going to present itself again in a different way when we start getting to the subpopulations. Now, the next slide that you see in front of you has that same type of graphic that we looked at before, but this one is based on our sub-pops. So you can see we have all students, white, economically disadvantaged, African American, Asian, emergent bilingual, Hispanic, 2 or more races, and then special education. This is an important slide, but I would like to go to the next one if you guys don't mind. So remember we said the heat map, right? Going back to the conversation we had earlier about closing the gaps, let's just take a look at this heat map for just a second. I think it is crystal clear the subpopulations that we should be focusing on when it comes to RLA. And I don't want to be that teacher, but does anyone want to call out the subpopulations that are falling behind in Judson ISD? Economically disadvantaged to some extent, emergent bilingual to some extent, right? So when we talk about closing the gaps, the conversations that we're having at the campus level is we have got to identify students that are in these groups and we have got to intervene for them swiftly, intentionally, and in a different way. And the reason why we say and in a different way is because we did provide small group instruction this year. We were intentional about small group instruction, but I'm not sure that we were intentional with these specific groups of students. So in order for us to really meet that metrics of closing the gaps, we've got to focus intentionally on these students, which means as a campus principal, when I'm walking into a 5th grade math class, I need to know the students that are in that room. I need to know where do they fall, what bucket do they fall into? Are they approaches, meets, and masters? Are they one of these specific demographic groups? And what am I doing as the campus principal to ensure that the teacher understands that data and is moving that data forward? We're going to keep coming back to this slide in each one of our content areas, and I want you guys to notice, spoiler alert, the same sub-pops are going to present over and over and over again, which I want to stamp it one more time, which means we have a systemic instructional problem in Judson ISD.
My son Some students fall into multiple buckets.
Thank you so much for saying that. Yes.
Some students fall into multiple buckets. So you could be at risk, and you could be SPED, and you could be African American. And so all of those then count multiple times when
Yes,
we're
ma'am.
looking at that data.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so
One student might
Right,
represent,
3 or 4.
so they're counted more than one.
More than likely, students are in more than one bucket. And there are different interventions that need to happen sometimes before a student can even access grade level text or grade level curriculum, right? There has to be an entry point. So our next slide, this slide really maps out those areas that we were talking about earlier, the components that build into accountability. Two things to really point out. On grade level text with purposeful writing is the way that we move RLA instruction forward, right? Remember, RLA stands for Reading Language Arts, which means it's reading and writing together. So we have to ensure that students are receiving on grade level text and are producing purposeful writing attached to that grade level text. Now, we just had a conversation about different entry points for different students. So what does that look like? So as a teacher, you have to be really intentional about first hooking students that struggle with reading, because if I'm a 7th grade student that struggles with reading and you're giving me a 7th grade text from jump, chances are I'm going to completely shut down. You can forget building reading proficiency. You can forget building writing proficiency. So what you have to do is teachers have to be incredibly gifted at hooking kids into reading, which means finding a text that is at your proficiency level, which might not be your grade level. We have lots of resources here in Judson ISD to provide this opportunity for students. So I'm going to break it down a little bit further to give you an idea of what this looks like. If you are an African American male student who is also a special education student in 7th grade, you have got to find a text that meets your proficiency level so that we can slowly grind away to get you as close to 7th grade proficiency level as we can. So there are resources that we use here in Judson ISD. I'm just going to make up a title. Give me a title of a book. Anything. Thank you, Catcher in the Rye. So we have the ability to take an on-grade level text, Catcher in the Rye, and be able to give it to a student that has the same exact components of this grade level text, but is at their proficiency reading level. So they're actually reading the exact same book as their peers, but it's at their proficiency level. Maybe they're a 4th grade reader. So if you were to look at this book, Catcher in the Rye, compared to the 7th grade book, the themes, the components, the characters, the storyline, it's identical. But the actual complexity of the text is 4th grade or 5th grade, so that there is an entry point for that student. I can have conversations with my peers about the themes of the story. I can have conversations about characters and how they develop, and it's at the entry point for me. Here's the problem, is the STAR test is not written that way. The STAR test is written at 7th grade level. So one of the things that we struggle with is because as teachers we have bleeding hearts. We want all kids to be successful. So sometimes we'll sit in this text longer than we need to, when the idea is give them that productive struggle. Let them be a little bit uncomfortable in the text. You have to slowly, gradually move that student closer and closer to that grade level proficiency. That's one of the things that we're really working hard on this year, because when they get ready to take the 7th grade STAR test, it is not differentiated. It is on grade level. They're expected to read, they're expected to answer the questions, and then don't forget, guys, they're expected to write to the text as well. So it is this balance of hooking kids, making sure that they're not so frustrated at the very beginning that they just give up, but we also have to keep their dignity intact. It's inappropriate to give a 7th grade African American male student in special education dog man while everyone else is reading Catcher in the Rye. So we have to be really, really careful with that.
We actually have texts
Yes.
that are written. We have an actual book that's written at a lower.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
I mean,
If we were to take a stroll down history lane, it really started with Scholastic Read 180. That's really kind of how that program started. Leveled text, all with the exact same title, but leveled It can even go above 7th grade. Yes, ma'am. And we have programs, instructional programs that we use as well that allow us to really identify a text and then differentiate down, scaffold down based on lexile.
So we're not buying a bunch of books necessarily?
They already
It's all
exist.
digital?
Well, no, we do have books as well. We have print and we have digital.
I mean, that sounds like a lot of books.
I'll take you to a site.
Yes.
I'd like to see one.
Go to one of the school book rooms.
I would like to
Has
see
all the
that.
books in it.
I would like to see that.
So remember, two things we're talking about with RLA, right? We have got to really make sure that the text complexity is there and that we're coupling the writing with it. We've got to analyze those student writing samples, make sure we're providing feedback, make sure we're measuring it with the TEA rubric. The other thing is we've got to make sure that that effective first teach, that strong tier 1 instruction is in place, and then small groups with intentionality, right? Sometimes what happens, and we've had this conversation around this exact table, is sometimes what happens is, as a teacher, I'm going to deliver that first teach to the level of my lowest student. And what we've done is we've robbed every student in that classroom of the opportunity to receive that instruction, that solid first teach at the level of the standard. We've got to start there and then scaffold down. All right, before we switch gears, how are we with the cadence of RLA?
Good.
Okay. Do we pause here? Do I keep grinding away?
Keep grinding until they flag you down.
Okay, got it. All right, so if we switch to the next one, again, we've got our table of contents for mathematics, and then we're going to dive into that data set that looks very familiar to us. I'm going to get a drink of water really quickly, if that's okay. All right, so we already identified when we talked earlier, we know that 7th grade math is our kryptonite. So as we're looking at 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, let's really be forward thinking about how is the 4th and 5th grade data informing what's happening in 7th grade. Because I want to be really clear, what we're seeing in 7th grade is not a 7th grade teacher issue. It's not a 7th grade student issue. It's not a curriculum issue. This is an issue that really starts to present itself in 3rd grade. So if you notice, overall elementary is moving in the right direction, but the true measure is meets, not approaches. So also remember when we were talking back with RLA, we were talking about we wanted to see that trajectory consistently moving forward, right? That upward trend. We're a little bit all over in the map when it comes to 3rd grade and 5th grade. You can see 4th grade has that pretty consistent trend line moving in that direction. 5th grade overall seems to be sort of outperforming 3rd and 4th grade. But remember, I want to remind you guys, meets is the measure, not approaches. So when we look at meets, 5th grade specifically, only 39% of our students met end of year standards by the end of 5th grade. Only 39%.
That's pretty consistent.
Across the board, from 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, it's.
It is. It absolutely is. I think the one thing I keep leaning back to and going back to is when I think about the descriptor of approaches, at the end of the year, our student is just approaching grade level, and that's alarming because TEA's descriptor also follows up by saying the student will need significant interventions the following year, which means day one, I'm already starting with significant interventions because I do not, as a student, I do not have the capacity to access 6th grade material. The only students that you see on this entire graphic that have the ability to access 6th grade material are the 5th grade meets and the 5th grade masters. We're proud of the work, but we have a ways to go.
It's important to identify what we need to work on.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. All right, so as we switch to middle school mathematics, no shocker there. There we see 7th grade. The point we are at now, and honestly, I think this would be true to say last year as well, is now our 7th grade deficiency is starting to bleed into 8th grade, and we will start to see it bleed into Algebra 1. So remember we talked earlier, right? It's almost like triage, stop the bleed. So the 7th grade issue that we see on this slide, I want to be really clear, is a kinder issue, a first grade issue, a second grade issue, a third grade issue. It just happens to sort of land in 7th grade. So when you think about looking at that 7th grade slide, right, 21% of our students at approaches, those kids are now sitting in an 8th grade classroom. 9% of our students at meets, those kids are now sitting in an 8th grade classroom. Only 9% of our current 8th graders actually have the skills needed to access the curriculum the teacher is giving them. And then 1% of our students at masters. So if we take a look at Algebra 1. Yes, sir.
Sorry, if you could backtrack on that slide. Obviously, I'm just thinking about the math and in middle school. You've been with us for a while now, and so just for perspective, what have we learned? Because we know that this is not something that's just occurred. We've been addressing this issue for a while. So is it teacher experience? Is it curriculum's changing? Is it, I mean, there are a lot of variables, but is there a couple from your vantage point that you have identified that could give us some thought about what we need to do strategically to address these issues?
So you asked, is it teacher experience? Is it curriculum? Yes, 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 right. It's all the things. It's a culminating factor. We talked earlier with RLA, right? We were very clear about we've got to focus in on writing, and we've got to really identify those student groups, right? When we talk about math, one of the things that our 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade teachers can do to help leverage 7th grade is we've got to focus in on automaticity. We have kids sitting in 7th and 8th grade classrooms who are still counting on their fingers. Right? So clearly there were components missed all the way back to kindergarten as far as that automaticity is concerned. So math is one of those components that it's interesting because we had a PD in June when A.T. Green was here, and one of the things he talked about was, I caught the flu the 3 days that my teacher taught rounding. And he said, I was literally behind for almost a full semester because I lost the initial teach of rounding. That is exactly how math builds, right? A little bit different from reading. Those reading skills that our 12th graders have in the classroom, they were actually learned in kinder. This is a very different animal. If you're missing a skill by the time you get to 4th grade in math, it is very, very difficult for you to recoup those skills. So the answer is, it's all the things above. We've got to get much better at identifying those gaps with students early, intervening early, and intervening specifically. So that looks like, if I'm a 4th grade student who doesn't know my multiplication facts, as a teacher, I'm having a conversation with your parents. And here's a deck of flashcards, and you're going home and you're learning your multiplication facts. Because friend, we cannot move on until you know how to multiply with automaticity. That's one of the components that we see continuing to present itself. And it's the conversation we had earlier about reading, right? If I'm already struggling with multiplication and my teacher is standing up here talking about multiplying and dividing fractions, I'm lost. I can't even remember what 4 times 3 is. So it's about identifying those gaps early and intervening early. I think sometimes, and I will take full ownership for this, I think sometimes we put so much pressure on teachers about attending to the pacing guide that sometimes they are hesitant to go back and spiral in some of these skills that are missing. The reality is you have to attend to the pacing guide because we have to teach all the skills before they take the STAR test. But the additional reality is if you can't multiply, it doesn't matter if I've taught you fractions or not. So I think we've got to find a really happy balance between what does this look like to intervene for these students that are missing core skills in math, and how do I continue to move the instruction forward? Let's talk for a second about curriculum. If we go back to the elementary slide in mathematics, right? We can see that elementary looks a little bit stronger than what our secondary math looks like. Remember, elementary has been in bluebonnet, and I say that in air quotes because when we first adopted it, it was Eureka. So they've been in Bluebonnet for 4 years now. So we're starting to see the fruits of the labor, right? We have not arrived, meets is our goal, but we're starting to see that really when you look at the trend lines. That's not the same story for middle school. Remember, last year was just year 1 with Bluebonnet. So we're really trying to refine those internalization practices, making sure that teachers are doing their due diligence with covering the entire lesson at the level, the rigor of the standard itself, and then pulling students into those small groups. But that work is hard. When you talk about intervening for math, it looks very, very different than intervening for reading. That was a super long answer to your incredibly short question.
No, and that's the reason why I asked it. I wanted to spur some thought behind it, because like I said, you guys are the subject matter experts. You're dealing with this constantly. We see it periodically when we have these level of discussions. But you keyed on one thing, and that was absenteeism. So if we need to look at strategies, we need to identify how many of our middle schoolers are missing class, where are they missing class, and then double back with some strategy to get them caught up. Because I think you're right, it builds on itself, and if they are behind, they're not going to be. So one other thing you didn't mention was parents. And so the variable is that we have parents that may not be understanding the importance of the work that needs to be done. I understand that there's also less homework going home these days. Again, I can't quantify that, but I understand that that might be so. So raising the parental expectation, the student's expectation, and then truly bringing something in that addresses the absenteeism issue to close that gap. I joked the last time we had this conversation, why don't we just go hire someone from another district whose math scores are up there? But that's a really simplistic approach. Yes, employee retention is important, but all these other variables you mentioned, I would think that we have a handle. We know where the issues are. It's just time to put processes and strategies in place to rectify them. And so I'll be looking for some of that discussion later on. Thank you for your candor.
Yes, sir, absolutely. So as I failed to mention this earlier, I should have mentioned it with RLA, but as we get into middle school and high school data, I want to remind you guys that typically teachers in middle school and high school are content-specific certified, which is a beautiful thing, but can also be dangerous. And the reason why I say that is because if you are a math-minded teacher, sometimes our instruction is at the level that maybe students aren't ready to receive it at. So one of the things we've really honed in on, especially with our Bluebonnet walks, is really getting teachers comfortable with their think aloud. So as the teacher is processing through how to solve a problem, that think aloud is incredibly important for kids because they need to hear what the teacher is thinking about math. When we met last week with Carnegie and we met with principals today, one of the things I said was, I didn't come out of college as a math teacher, but I'll tell you what, the year I had to teach 5th grade math, my math scores were outrageous, and I mean in a really good way. Why? Because I was teaching myself the math along with my kids. It makes you a phenomenal teacher. When you have to, as an adult, say, you know what, I'm not really sure how to process this. I'm gonna work this through and I'm gonna tell you guys what I'm thinking, and if there's some components here that we need to like spar back and forth, let's have the conversation. It was one of the best years of teaching I had because I was literally learning the math as I went through. That's one of the beautiful things about Bluebonnet is the way that the lessons are written out, it forces the teacher to internalize the work. And I know that we've had this conversation before. Being in the classroom for a while, we naturally internalized because we wrote our own lesson plans, right? And my lesson rehearsal happened the night before when I couldn't sleep and I thought about how am I going to teach the lesson, right? It's not what it looks like anymore. So when teachers receive a Bluebonnet lesson, they cannot stand in front of the class and look at this lesson for the very first time. They've got to spend time internalizing and getting comfortable with it and working out the problems and figuring out, where is Laura Stanford in my class? Where is she going to struggle? I need to make sure I point this out to her. That's the beautiful thing about Bluebonnet is it creates a space for that lesson internalization and that rehearsal, which as teachers 20 years ago, we were taught how to do that. So that's the component that we really are kind of digging into with math is, teachers, you've got the expertise, you know how to teach math. Now just crack it open, show kids the code. It shouldn't be a secret. Model your think aloud, model how you're thinking about the problem solving so that students can understand it. Yes, ma'am, you don't need to raise your hand.
Yes, ma'am, you can ask questions.
I was at Metzger last week, and they told me it's their 8th grade, and that's chart supports it.
Yes, ma'am.
That's their 7th.
Yes, ma'am.
Where's the other 70% of the kids? You've got 31 at approaches, meets, and masters.
Does not meets.
And I mean, I guess I'm going to talk to my fellow educators. I think we need the old remedial math teachers back, and the ones that pulled the low ones out, work specifically on what they need, and then put them back in. What are we doing with that other 70%? How are we teaching them?
So, yes, we have to intervene for these students, and I'm going to be very, very honest with you guys. We are in a space right now where more of our students need intervention than not. And you cannot intervene your way out of a tier 1 instructional problem. So what we have to do, it's like we talked about earlier, we have to find that, we've got to find the clutch and gas, right? Tells you how old I am, talking about driving a standard. You got to find the clutch and gas, because we have to keep moving forward with tier 1 instruction. We cannot abandon it, because at the end of the school year, these kids are taking a test. We've got to make sure we're providing solid tier 1 instruction, but we've got to spiral in during that tier 1 instruction, and we also have to pull intentional small groups. One of the conversations we had today with principals is these special population tutors that we're hiring, we need to start hiring them specifically for math. Typically here in Judson ISD, the narrative has been, we need to hire these special populations teachers to intervene for reading. Because the story has been, if you can't read, you can't do math, right? The reality is, we're in a crisis when it comes to math, and we've got to start seeking out these special populations teachers specifically for math, because it's going to take the classroom teacher, it's going to take the RTI teacher, it's going to take a special populations teacher, it's going to take an academic trainer, and it's going to take parents to move the needle on math instruction.
What about hiring like seniors? Because they often have another job, right? They often have jobs outside school. Hiring them to be mentors or to come in and help tutor, that might be appealing to the students, the younger students, to have someone that close to them. That might be something that even helps the seniors in some way, like get credit for it, especially if they want to maybe be a teacher. But that might even make some people want to be teachers.
Absolutely. We had a conversation today as well about finding some NLC students who could especially those that graduated from JECA or are in the NLC program through Alamo Promise, and see what kind of hours we can get these guys to see if they can help us out with some of these components. I think the tricky thing with seniors is trying to find time during the day to allow them to intervene, but I think there's some opportunities here. We were also approached by, and Jody talked about it today, I'm not going to be, Ms. Burton talked about it today, I'm not going to be able to remember the name, but there are organizations here in San Antonio that students are trying to get volunteer hours and can go into campuses and provide that support as well. We're looking at all avenues, and we are open to suggestions. So if you guys know anyone who wants to help out with math tutoring, we are open 100%.
Why don't we put the word out to the seniors? There might be some that would have the ability to schedule in, and it doesn't have to be volunteer if we're willing to hire people anyway. It could be a job that they could take on. We could hire them. And that would also
Yes, ma'am.
help them. Like you were just saying a while ago, when you are learning, you are getting more proficient at it too. This might actually help us increase the proficiency of our upper grades.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so if we can go to high school math next. Hi.
Sorry, Dr. Sanders.
No,
I
no
just
worries.
have a question because you did say consistency and just clicked my mind. So now that Bluebonnet because we had it first year at middle school, right? So this is like the continuation. Are we doing like, for like this year, the consistency among, you know, from elementary, middle, and high school about having just one language and math? Because what I found out before is that it becomes like the struggle at middle school is like, I'm just gonna give an example, like finding the area or finding the perimeter. It seems like on grade school there's some language in there, and then middle school it's kind of like different. So like the kids are kind of like confused, I guess, but it's just the same.
Yes, ma'am.
So are we doing now like, I don't know, maybe kind of like strict about it, about teachers, so that even when you go to high school, when we see like how to get the area or perimeter, it's still the same as what it's teaching on the elementary?
Yes, ma'am. So the academic vocabulary, academic language is one of the components that we are specifically looking for and measuring when we do a classroom observation. The beautiful thing about Bluebonnet is the academic language is already outlined for teachers. It's highlighted within the lesson plan itself, and it will even go as far as to say, this is what, I'm going to use a 7th grade math lesson for an example. This is what it looked like in 6th grade. This is what it will look like in 8th grade. But it is very clear about keeping that academic language or that academic vocabulary consistent. Because to your point, a 5th grade teacher will teach the butterfly method. And by the time they go to 6th grade, and the teacher is teaching them the exact same concept, but not calling it the butterfly method, the student's like, I've never even seen this before. The reality is they've seen it since 3rd grade, but it was called something different. So we are incredibly diligent about measuring that academic vocabulary as we go into classrooms. And one of the things we talked about in August PD with teachers is these tips and tricks that we've gotten so used to in math are actually doing students a disservice. That's why you have to teach them the conceptual understanding of the math in order to move the instruction forward. Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
And I'm just going to jump in with one comment just to make sure everybody, we all keep us up, including you, up on the strategic round two.
Yes,
so how this, we're getting the data now, then we're going to set some goals. Then it turns to action, right? So what district, once we approve the goals, what district owes back to the board then is their action plan. So a lot of this stuff we're talking about is step 3, and we're still on step 1, which is just data. This is just data. It's not what we're doing to fix this data. This is strictly data. Then we'll move to step 2, which is, all right, what are the outcomes we want related to this data in terms of goals? And then district will come back to us with strategic plans, district improvement plans, processes and procedures, everything you're putting in to place to meet the annual targets that we end up setting. So that may
I
make
apologize,
it,
my handlers did a bad job of not keeping me on track.
Correct. Yeah,
Epic fail, epic fail
I
right
know.
here.
We get the board. This is great that we are so into the data and we get all sorts of good ideas. But like, jot your good ideas down, type thing, because we will then have another action planning session like this of how we're actually going to, how you guys plan to change this stuff for next year. So that may be
Absolutely.
helpful. So we
Yes,
can
ma'am. Yes,
keep
ma'am.
I
pushing
have a
through.
quick question on the Bluebonnet.
Don't throw me off track.
Weren't we
Is
talking
it a
about
strategic
Bluebonnet?
question? That's
Yes, we were talking about academic vocabulary.
Now, the teachers that have had it now for 4 years, are they liking it?
Yes, I will say yes, they like it. And they are getting, elementary is now in the component of lesson rehearsal. Like, they're already coming to PLCs with their lessons internalized. I will say the one thing that we struggle with, and I'm going to go back to, because as teachers we are incredibly compassionate, is sometimes keeping that pace and that rigor is hard. We don't want to see kids struggle. But the reality is we've got to get everyone to understand that we have got to deliver that effective first teach, that solid tier 1 instruction has to be at the level of the standard. Otherwise, we're actually doing a greater disservice by the time the STAR test rolls around. So if I had to, yes, they love it, but the one piece we struggle with is sometimes the pace and rigor is difficult.
I would think you'd have that regardless, whatever the curriculum is. You're going to have kids that understand it. Kids
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But if you don't have something that is as structured as Bluebonnet, it's really easy to just bring the level of, Bluebonnet does not allow you to do that. I mean, every single problem, I'm going to move on. But yes, it doesn't allow for it. Okay, so, yes.
Can I?
Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Okay, and let me know if I need to pause, because I don't know if it falls into what Ms. Ryan was saying. But looking at the grade 6 for RLA and math also, I'm just wondering, we did the block scheduling
Yes.
for that.
Yes.
So has that been looked at as to what was missing since they had that extra period of instruction and there wasn't gains like
No.
we were looking for? Because I know at Metzger and Kirby this year, they're doing block again. So my concern is, what are we looking at there to make sure we're utilizing that extra period that the students are in?
So the initial answer is no, we did not look specifically at, I mean, Kirby and Metzger's overall data kind of can tell us a story on whether or not it was effective. I think our next step is to ensure that what is happening in that math lab is that solid intervention based on what students need. So I feel like one of the opportunities that maybe we left on the table last year was we were doing small group, but I'm not absolutely convinced that it was data-informed small group. So just pulling a small group to your table and repeating the tier 1 instruction doesn't actually leverage moving students forward. I have to figure out what is Stephanie Jones' gap so that when she comes to my table, I am filling that gap specifically. It may not even be anything near what I did in tier 1 instruction today, but I know if she doesn't understand 2-digit by 1-digit multiplication, we cannot go further. So it's being more intentional with that math lab time and making sure, very, very prescriptive, making sure that what you need is what I am giving you at the table. It's not good enough to just say, I pulled a small group today. Did you pull a data-informed, intentional small group? That goes back to the conversation we had about those sub-pops. As a campus principal, when I go into that math lab, I better know every single one of those kids and which bucket or buckets they fall into, and I need to sit at that small group table. I want to hear every single rotation that's coming through to ensure it meets the needs of kids.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. So I just wanted to say one quick thing about high school before we go to the next slides, is if you notice Algebra 1, at first glance looks like, oh wow, 72 approaches, we're actually moving the needle. Remember, approaches is not the we have arrived. If you take a look at meets and masters, remember what we're saying is only 27% of our students actually met the grade level expectation. Okay, so we see our performance pipeline. We've all been together for a minute talking about math data. I don't think 7th grade is a surprise here. So if we could go on to the next one. Remember, this is our comparison to the state of Texas. That black through line is how the state performs, and then this tells us where we fall compared to the state. Bless you. Next one is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Let's hone in on 7th grade for just a second. Once again, it just presents our 7th grade math deficiency in a different way. So again, not only are we struggling with Judson ISD data compared to Judson ISD data, but we're struggling compared to Region 20 as well as the state of Texas.
And I'm going to jump in on that one because we'll hear a lot of stuff about, well, the test is hard. 7th grade math is hard. And this shows it's not the test and it's not the curriculum, because other districts and other 7th grade teachers are figuring out how to teach kids 7th grade math, because we are 22, 23 points behind in those categories, and even 8th grade it meets again too. So it's not the test, it's not the curriculum, it's not the kids. It's somehow in the way we are delivering it across the entire pipeline that gets them here, so.
And thank you. And to go back to the conversation we had with RLA, what this tells us is we have a systemic issue. And I want to be really clear for all the Algebra 1, 7th grade, and 8th grade teachers that are listening. This is not a 7th grade, 8th grade, or Algebra 1 issue. This is a systemic math issue in Judson ISD. It just happens that these kids land in 7th grade, and that's where we see it start to present itself. And then we have Algebra 1. The next one we see are our sub-pop graphs, but with y'all's permission, I would like to fast forward to the mathematics student group gap. So that's slide 28. So remember we talked earlier, right, about that closing the gaps really means that we have to address those student groups. And when we talked about RLA, I asked you guys which student groups are presenting itself, and spoiler alert, we're going to see it across all content. So here we are with African American, economically disadvantaged, special education, and at risk. What is the one sub-pop that we saw in RLA that seems to be doing okay in mathematics? That's emergent bilingual. And the reason for that is because mathematics is a universal language. 2 + 2 in English and Spanish are the same. So the conversation about math is we have less sub-pops that we have to intervene for, right? One less than what we saw in RLA. So it's about moving that needle forward with those sub-pops, figuring out what does this look like. And I'm going to go back to what we said earlier. A lot of this really boils down to automaticity. Students are missing those key math facts early on, and so it starts to perpetuate itself when we see it in 7th grade, 8th grade, Algebra 1.
It looks like economic dis is green here.
But still below.
Those negatives in front of the numbers, so.
Should it be orange or?
'Cause it's not a 5.
We're close. They're not super far away.
Because
That's
this
why
is
it's kind of a lighter green, because we're
could be two
within,
kids,
we're
one way
within
or
a
the other.
standard deviation of the average, but I think is why it's green.
I'm really glad you
Something to
pointed
keep
that
our
out.
eyes on.
Yeah.
I'm glad you pointed that out, Ms. Stanford, because if you take a look at Hispanic, specifically with approaches, do you see it says +0? Which means that our Hispanic students are performing at the exact same rate all students are. Which means if we go over to economically disadvantaged, they are 5 percentage points below all students.
I'm just gonna throw in what I gotta, I
Yes,
gotta throw in my dual language
Yes,
thing.
ma'am.
Is some of the things you will see in emergent bilingual too is, remember, these kids got their math instruction in their native language when they were in kinder, 1st and 2nd. And that is the magic of dual language, is they can access early mathematics in their home language. And then they now have all the things they need to start transitioning to learning math in English, because they already have all the basic foundational. And that's why so many districts are trying to get as much dual language going as possible, because those are the kind of results you see out of dual language.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so if we go to the last slide for math, our 2 takeaways. That effective first teach, right, that solid tier 1 instruction has to be in place at the rigor of the standard, which as long as we're following the Bluebonnet lessons, that should not be an issue. Secondary, we're focusing on internalization. At elementary, we're focusing on lesson rehearsal. And then the high leverage skill that we're really working on across all grade levels is that automaticity. Kids knowing their math facts and knowing it without having to think about it. It is the equivalent of your sight words in reading. Good? Okay. And we are
We'll
ready.
go through science and social studies way faster, because we won't have goals related to them. But
Yes,
if y'all
ma'am.
have questions, but we'll just spend just a moment on each of those slides.
All right, so if it's okay with you guys, I'm just going to talk high level. 2 things to think about when we're thinking about 5th grade and 8th grade science. The 5th grade science test is comprised of 3rd and 4th grade TEKS. We have historically in Judson ISD struggled with that 5th grade science piece. One of the contributing factors to that is, again, going back to teachers being compassionate. We don't always adhere to the master schedule. So when I go over in reading time, or when I go over in math, or I need to pull a small group from math, I'm going to rob time from science. We see it start to present itself because that 5th grade test is comprised of those 3rd and 4th grade TEKS. The exact same thing is going to happen in 8th grade, right? So even though there is a standalone science period, we have done our 8th grade students a disservice because we robbed them of some opportunities in 3rd grade science, in 4th grade science, and 5th grade science, and now it presents itself in 8th grade science. So why biology? So why does biology seem to be doing a little bit better than maybe the others? I want to remind you that once you get to high school, these are subject matter experts. Also, this is an important piece to note, biology is an end of course exam, which means you need this in order to graduate. There's a little bit of a different leverage point with a biology test than maybe 5th grade science. So that's just a narrative that we need to kind of reshape here in Judson ISD. I think the next slide, the important thing to note is that 5th and 8th grade science, if vocabulary is not addressed consistently, going back to the academic language that Ms. Lee was talking about, if we're not consistent with that academic vocabulary, that academic language, it's going to start to present itself in biology. Although our biology looks green, I want to remind you, when we start comparing ourselves to the state, things start to look a little bit different. Again, high school students are taking that biology as an end of course exam. So remember what I just said, when we looked at that chart, it looked like biology, we're firing on all cylinders, but then when you go to the next slide, remember that black line is that through line of the state. You can see that although compared to Judson, we're doing a great job, compared to the rest of the state, we have some opportunities for growth. All right, we're going to skip forward to slide 36, which brings us back to our student groups. African American, emergent bilingual, special education, and at risk, presenting itself once again. All right, so when we talk about strengthening the pipeline for science, really 2 takeaways: being really consistent with that academic language from 3rd grade through biology, and having 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers really attend to that master schedule. When your science block starts, you stop math, you stop RLA, because even if we pull 5 minutes out of that 45-minute science block, that starts to compound, and before you know it, we're sending kids to 5th grade that are missing key skills from 3rd and 4th. And now we're ready for social studies. DOJ?
Sure, so I'm providing some relief for my boss. So when we get to social studies, we see only 2 grade levels tested, 8th grade and US history. It's obvious exactly what Kristen has been saying all evening is what stands out as the red, 8th grade social studies. What we know is that there are 3 things happening simultaneously. When we're looking at social studies, we are looking at reading skills. So when we spoke way long ago about RLA and...
Hey, it wasn't that long ago. I moved quick.
About the context, what they're looking at. We're talking about a subject matter in 8th grade, the first time they take it, that is all-encompassing, U.S. history. It's not a brief area subject. So we do have that. So they need to read, they need to analyze. We see that it's very consistent at approaches, meets, and masters, but just like the other stories that we've been telling in math and RLA, once we get to meets, there's a sharp drop between approaches, and still approaches is approaching grade level, but even within approaches, as I always say, is you have the high and the low. So if you're on the low end of approaches, you are going to struggle with the reading. You are going to struggle when you're trying to interpret graphs. You're going to struggle when you're trying to apply that background knowledge that maybe you weren't able to capture and hold on to. So that's what we see with 8th grade social studies. Then you jump to meets, and we're at 66%. And so that's huge. But we have to also remember that there was a 3-year gap between our 8th grade social studies and now U.S. history. Same subject, but just like Kristen was saying, we're talking about 2 different sets of kids. even when it's the same student. So US history is a graduation requirement. There is a maturity, not just maturity period, but writing and reading maturity as well when you go into high school and you start having world literature and you start reading those complex texts. So there is a lot to factor in of why this is it. So we want to protect what's happening in U.S. history, and to the point that we've been making is also, it's the same subject matter. So let's look at and identify the practices that are successful in these U.S. history classes at the high school level and try to replicate them and implement them at the 8th grade, because it is a tale of two performances.
Would you say there's a pattern where if it's required for graduation, there's suddenly more focus on it and therefore there's better performance?
And I don't know if they're suddenly more focused, but they definitely are hyper aware of it. And we can't also dispute the fact that an 8th grade student is way different than an 11th grader.
Right.
And so, I mean, I taught at the high school level, was an administrator at all the levels, and there definitely are differences, emotional, the reading that happens. Also, like we pointed out earlier, high school teachers are content-specific subject matter experts, and not that elementary and middle school are not, but you have to have that degree, you have to have that certificate, you have to have those hours in it. And so they might have some practices that we want to see and replicate with those social studies teachers. But yes, knowing that your diploma rides on it definitely does make a difference.
Yeah, and the EOCs are, the star 3 through 8 is not meant to get 100%, everyone to get
No,
100%.
yes.
You're never going to hit a 100.
No.
That's not how it is stratified in the scores and the cut lines.
Exactly.
But the EOCs have to be designed that in theory, everyone has to get to approaches, because otherwise, if you're at 43% in US history, it means 57% of the kids are not graduating high school. And so if we only had a 43% graduation rate in the state of Texas, somebody would be looking for a new job somewhere type thing. So we should, at least when we get to the EOCs, see some massive bumps. But again, if compared to the state, we'll know how massive that bump should be on their first try around.
So I'm just going to do high level. I'm going to skip over 40 and jump to 41. The drop pins just tells the same story we saw earlier, not only for social studies, but the other subjects is grade 8, where we already saw lower performance, is of course further behind Texas. U.S. history, we knew that we were already meeting with Region 20, and we were nipping on the heels of the state, and the drop pin graph shows that as well. When we look at the 3-year student trend, it's pretty even keel, which not only for all students, but all the demographic, all the different student groups. So that does give us a strong indication of needing to strengthen and deepen practices, changing that breadth of practice, and what we're asking the students to do engagement-wise definitely would benefit us here. Then going to the student group gap, we see the same story, and I almost want to say, of course we would. If social studies is text dependent, if we already said that we can sometimes identify the correct choice when it's listed in A, B, C, and D. But if we have to interpret a graph, if we have to write an answer, if we have to read something and then come up with the answer ourselves, we struggle a little bit more there. So that comprehension part is something we need to grow, which of course is where it brings us to the 27 and beyond, is recovering those 8th graders, but starting in kindergarten. We will continue to say over and over and over, EOC starts in kindergarten. The reading, the writing, all of that, and the math is all dependent on what skills are laid in the elementary. So for moving beyond approaches, we need to look at that text complexity. We need to make sure they're inferencing. We need to make sure they're writing.
Just one comment on social studies, because this is strengthening what we can now is great, but it's about to become a significant emotional event for everyone in every social studies. The way the path and what you learn is now not the same.
Yes.
You used to learn these 6 units in kindergarten, well, now you're learning these units instead. And first grade, completely different unit. So everyone who's ever been teaching social studies at any grade level is now not going to be teaching those things anymore in the order that they are in scope and sequence across all the grade levels. So that will be interesting to see how that rolls out. We got a little preview of that from the commissioner, and how they're piecemeal together seems to make a little bit more sense. So it'll be interesting to see how that rolls out. So, okay, I think this would be a good 5-minute, stretch your legs, get another bottle of water, a bag of chips, and run to the restroom, but let's not stretch it into 15 minutes. So take care of your business and then come right back. So the time is 6:56 and we are in a brief recess.
Ready? Okay, so we're moving on to.
Hold on.
Oh,
I have to go back in order. All right, the time is, sorry, I shushed you on
Yeah, I'm
mic.
ready to go.
All right, the time is now 7:04, and we have returned from our recess. All right, so I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Roscoe, to plow through CCMR. Board, please keep an eye on this one also, because CCMR is another House Bill 3 required goal. So, and I'll turn it over to you.
Definitely. So for CCMR, we're talking about college, career, military readiness. I'm not really going to go through each slide. I'm going to talk about CCMR a little bit more so that when you look at the slides later on your own, you'll have a little, you'll be able to see the connection. So ultimately, when we're talking about CCMR, which is all throughout accountability, which is also why it's one of the House Bill goals, is we are looking at the end of the day school quality. That's literally what it's called in domain 3. So because if we've done our kinder through 12th grade work with reading and math and science and social studies, then a student should be college, career, or military ready. So when we look at this, we see on this first slide, we see the college readiness. So a student can qualify in various ways, but it only count once. And I'll give you an example. A 12th grader who enlists in the military is CCMR met. We get a point for them. But that same student also has an industry-based certification. Maybe he went through the pre-dental program. That's also CCMR met point. And then in order to get that certification, he also passed his TSI reading and math, and he was able to get that college readiness there. He may have all those different points where he was able to get CCMR qualified, but he will only count once in it. So that just gives you an idea of all the different avenues for it, which is what these slides show. So this first slide is about college readiness. So when we look at college readiness, we're looking at math and RLA. We're looking at, did the student get it in any combination? Did a student earn it in SAT, ACT, or TSIA 2? Did they get it through a college prep class? Did they earn it through AP scores? There are so many different ways, but it all boils down to what the name is, which is college readiness. Then on the next slide, that just goes to show the different college pathways. So going on to the next one for career and military, when we speak of career, we're looking at a student who has taken a pathway and he concentrates in that pathway. And so if it's, let's say a student is taking cosmetology, I'm just using that as an example, and they take it for the 4 years, they've concentrated in that area. Then when they turn 18, they take the industry-based certification exam, they earn it. That's a student that counts for us as career ready. And then finally, military readiness. A student enlists in the military. It's gone through different phases, and I love where it's landed, which is now the military actually keeps track of it and submits all of the DD4s, their enlistment forms, to the state. And so then it's just plugged in, and the students are matched up by their unique ID numbers, and that shows you for the career readiness. What I want to show is where we are, that drop pin chart that we really like, where we are in relation to Texas. So we see that for the college readiness, again, those exams and courses that are a little bit higher rigor, those college readiness entrance exams, we see that we're a little bit behind in certain areas. However, when you look at 24, 25, 26, you see we're getting stronger. CCMR is our probably most improved story throughout the history, starting from 23. We made a focus effort on making sure students had multiple opportunities to take different tests, the ACT, the SAT, the TSIA2, all of those multiple times starting in 10th grade, so that's helped. We have the college career counselors, all of them, and so you see that we're closing those gaps. Then for career and military, you'll see that on some of these.
I'm sorry, could I make a comment on that last one?
Yes, please, ma'am.
Sorry, only because I brought this up like a lot of times, because I watch our surrounding districts and how much we are gapping on dual credit.
Yes.
Is a major pain point for me, because I've traveled to so many districts around the state, and I've seen what they've been able to do in their comprehensive high schools with dual credit, and what that does financially for families when you can pick up 30, 40 credits. I was gonna say, my own kid, finally, I put one in some dual credit, and she's walking in as pretty much a sophomore at Texas State, and that was only with a few dual credit classes. So that's gonna save me some money. And so the fact that we're, 14% under, and UT on-ramps too. They do a lot of that up in Church-Cibolo and some of our surrounding districts, and having access to that when you may not have a dual credit professor available on your campus, but when you can get a UT professor doing it and get the UT on-ramps credit, I know that's something we may be having some bigger strategic conversations about over the next year, because those pins those really tell a story about what we're providing to our students, and plays into a lot of our portrait of a graduate. So
Definitely, and that portrait of graduate, and coupled with what Ms. Rain said about the dual credit, that would be an example of, okay, that's somewhere that we need to hone in, make a goal, and so then what are the action steps afterwards? What are going to be our progress measures, what you're going to go into soon? Thank you for adding that, ma'am. Then when we look at the next one about the CCMR career and military, you'll see that military, we are above the line from the state in 24, and then we dropped a little bit, and then we went back up again. I really think that having a consistent process for every campus helped in that. But what I love is that it's in the military, the advanced diploma, because we want all students to be somehow, some way, college, career, military ready. And careers come in all shapes and sizes. So there's also a pathway for our SPED students through a diploma, through a graduation plan, an advanced diploma. And then, of course, the workforce, we have been above for special ed workforce. You're leaving high school with work skills. We have consistently been above the line 24, 25, 26. Okay, so then we go to the 3-year student group trend. I'm jumping forward to the gaps, because this, again, success story. We need to grow in different areas, but when we look at CCMR, what we want to do is we want to sustain that growth. We did a really big jump with some very targeted efforts, but we want to sustain that. Just because we did that jump, now the test is going to be, are we able to keep it, and how are we going to keep it, which is everything else we covered earlier with the younger grades leading up to high school, so that they are ready. The way the state looks at it in accountability, they call it student success up through high school, and then they call it school quality, because that's what we're looking at. Okay. So then the student group gap to Texas for CCMR, we're looking at only the 26 performance right now. The bottom line is all of where our 26 numbers were for the different demographics, and then you'll see our point difference from the state. Remember that when we look at all students in that first column, it does include all of the student groups to the right of it. And this one is probably one of our most varied, very distinct coloring versus some of the other heat maps that we had. And I'd like to point out that for our SPED, this is an area as they get into high school, and it's such a targeted feature, CCMR, of how we address those SPED students, that we're actually a point above the state in this one. But there are some definite areas. We don't want any student, when we graduate a student, we want each and every one of them to be college, career, and military ready. As a matter of fact, for Domain 3, what the federal part looks at is they look at every student if they were a 12th grader, because if they were a 12th grader at your campus, then they should walk out. Whether or not they had a diploma in hand, at least somewhat prepared to be, if they go and get an equivalency degree, then be college ready. If they're able to go into the workforce, be career ready, or if they choose to join the military, be military ready. And then really what I said earlier is we want to protect the gains that we've made. We want to make sure we're expanding through meaningful college and career readiness programs. We want to make sure that we're helping lead students to the next steps of their post-secondary career. We want to enable them to be contributing members of society, either by attending college and majoring in whatever they want to, entering the workforce right away, or joining the military, which in turn will parlay into some type of career later. Yes, please.
So that is all of the student-facing data. The remaining slides we're not going to put up here, you guys have in front of you, are more of administrative conversations and the way that we lead campus principals through their TPES, the way that campus principals will build their goals moving forward after the board determines our district goals. As you look through those last slides, you'll notice the very next slide kind of talks about our cohorts for the C&I department and which campuses we're supporting in different ways. Behind those slides, you also have our targeted campuses sort of profile. So the way that those conversations have regarding the profile is how to move that specific campus's accountability forward. As you guys know, we've had lots of conversations about Metzger Middle School and how important it is for us to get them as high as we possibly can. A C would be fantastic. That is the goal. So as we look at those historical trends, it really informs that instruction moving forward. Because to Mr. Macias's point earlier, the last thing we want to do is to leave a campus principal or a faculty member feeling as though there is a specific goal in hand, but they do not have the resources needed to address those goals. So remember when we first started this afternoon about we will have the district goals, we will have a campus principal's student growth goal, and then each individual teacher has their student growth goal. Within those two realms, the principal's goal and the individual student's growth goal, teachers are going to ask for resources. They're going to ask for support. We need to make sure as a district that we are poised to give teachers and campus leadership the support they need in order to meet those specific goals.
Sorry, hold on.
We've got 1.5 million of staff running around this district now.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's very specialized staff. And I think what I observe, people are very receptive.
They are.
To these outsiders. They really are. They're so engaged. I don't know if they're scared of them or what, but they are intense.
We had a conversation with principals today just reminding them that Carnegie works for us. So if there are roadblocks that are happening on the campuses, they are to lay those roadblocks at the feet of Carnegie, right? Carnegie is helping grow principals who in turn grow teachers. And so we have lots of conversations about what this work should look and feel like. Some of these things have happened naturally. With our newer principals, it's getting them, to your point, Dr. Dixon, it's getting them comfortable with the coach and letting them know that they work for you. If you have seen something in a classroom that needs to be addressed and you need to turn to your Carnegie coach and say, hey, can we practice what a feedback session would look like? That's their role. And then at the end of this afternoon, we were really, really straightforward with the principals. Give us feedback right now. 9 days into the work, how is the work feeling? How do you feel about the match with your coach and the principal? And if any point you feel like you're not getting what you need, you've got to raise the red flag. Because to Dr. Dixon's point, we've invested a lot of money. We want to make sure we're getting our bang for our buck. Right now, things feel incredible. Another conversation we had this afternoon is we want this same intentionality and sense of urgency. We want this same feeling in October and in February and in March. Because if we can keep this steady cadence going, we are poised for great gains here in Judson ISD.
And I know this sounds a little negative, but a principal told me, I was at the school, the Carnegie people were there, they were in their rooms, and if this is only 9 days of school, this must have been 7 or 6, and the principal was already putting a teacher on a growth plan. She said, we can no longer have these over-the-top evaluations and low student performance. And the Carnegie person was guiding it and saying, this is not instruction, this is not happening. Let's step it up. We got to get moving. And I think y'all are gonna hear, the reason I'm bringing this up is y'all are gonna hear about some of this, but it's gonna improve instruction. I think you're gonna see the results of it.
Does Carnegie work with the principals or directly with the teachers? Or
Directly with the
They were in
principal.
the principals?
Now, I will say this, we have had two principals, help me out if I get this wrong. We've had two principals reach out to us, high school principals, saying, we need some direct coaching with teachers that are new to the campus with Bluebonnet. So Carnegie has been generous enough to offer some teacher coaching, but the lift is designed to grow leadership. They directly support leadership in the observation and feedback component as well as the PLC component.
We do have some teacher coaching, some of our.
They're in the classroom though, too.
Yes.
With the principals.
Yes.
They are going in and observing the principals and then giving them the feedback.
So instead of bypassing the principal as the instructional leader, Carnegie works with the principal to grow that capacity to be able to support teachers.
And that is 100% funded off a very specific grant.
Yes, ma'am.
And the money could only be used
Correct.
for this contract.
Yes, ma'am.
So we didn't take 1.5 million away from electricity or buses or anything else. It was a very specific grant we applied for and were accepted to.
Yep.
I guess our highest risk campuses, we didn't really look at, when we looked at accountability scores last week, we did not talk about accountability history on some of them because TEA has set some goals for you in, well, really, the legislature has written you some goals of your own type thing. So
Slide 57 has that sort of outlined for us. I caution us to maybe not have this forward-facing because there's a conversation that needs to happen with one of our campuses based
Still.
on some information.
Okay,
Yes,
oh,
ma'am.
on the new information.
Yes,
so.
ma'am.
Okay, I think these will be good slides because we'll talk about when we get to the campus improvement plans, tips, taps, lips, dips, whatever's type things, the 10 most concerning campuses that have to get moving faster than the other ones have to get moving, how we integrate this into then informs what we will then see on their tip, tap, lip, or whatever plan they end up being on. And I know we're still waiting on federal identification for 26 also, so that may add the number of, we may have somebody else show up on a federally identified that will then possibly need a tip also. So, okay. I guess any other questions from the board on the academic portion? Are you all wrapped up? Okay, I'll open it up for questions on that. You got something? Oh, yes, I couldn't tell.
No, I was just wondering in regards to the campuses that we have listed here, when are we going to actually have that conversation so parents are aware if their campus is actually one of those?
You're talking about slide 57?
Yes, ma'am.
So every campus knows, with the exception of one, and there was some new information released, and so we have not closed the loop with that campus principal yet, so I would feel very uncomfortable talking about that here when the principal is not aware yet. But all of the other campuses, that they are well aware. Now what we'll do is we will receive a letter that will be sent out to families.
Okay.
Letting them know the status of their campus and next steps.
Okay. Because I think just kind of, I know the slide that we showed at our last meeting, it was kind of rainbows and unicorns.
Yes,
with
ma'am.
saying we had X amount of campuses stay the same or improve, where this information here is very concerning, that people need to be aware of.
Absolutely. So the campuses you see on this list could have improved, but still fall into this intervention category.
Right.
So I think two things can be true, right? We could have seen a campus make gains, but still within that third year D or second year D, and so it's still concerning to us. We're not trying to, The goal of last Thursday was not to try to hide anything. It was to celebrate the fact that we went from a D to a C, which is an incredible heavy lift. The purpose of this is now let's dive deep into what are we doing for these campuses specifically. That's why these profiles that you see behind here are the pieces that we leverage when talking to the campus principal. Because now, these profiles you see behind you, these conversations look very different with campus leadership. Very different. And so that's sort of like that next step.
Right. And I wasn't trying to imply anything was being hidden.
Oh, no, no, no,
It was
no.
just, though, seeing things out, people talking.
Yes.
People are assuming that since we improved, it almost comes across that we don't have these critical or at-risk campuses still.
Agreed,
So
agreed.
that's why I was just wondering when that
No,
was
I
going to be
appreciate that
touched on.
feedback, and I appreciate you saying it that way. Because I do want to remind everyone, although we are a C, we have not yet arrived. Because when you think about the way that those percentages broke out when we were looking at approaches, meets, and masters, we have really got to start changing the narrative in this district about meets should be where we're measuring. But for so many years, we've just been talking about that approaches. And honestly, the state doesn't help us by saying a student passes at approaches. So it's just really about us being a united front and changing that language about our goal here in Judson ISD is that your student is at meets or masters. And as a parent, you should be asking questions if your student is consistently year after year at approaches.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think there's still some analysis and communication going on too about all these split campuses and closed campuses and 8 campuses closed and all of that. And it's going to make the public or parents looking stuff up on the internet just highly confused at this point, because you go, look, I'll just pick on Kirby, just because you're going to go look up Kirby, 2 Kirbys are going to come up in the thing, and you're like, why are there 2 Kirbys? And we don't understand what it is. So I think we've talked about the principals being able to communicate what their ratings are in a way that makes sense, and having to explain transitions of codes and accountability history in a way that families will understand. It's like, oh, we were this and a this, but this is what it's going to be moving forward. And TEA figuring out, oh, you closed this school, what are you going to do with the ratings? That is an ongoing thing over the next couple weeks to figure out how to communicate that to staff and to parents, right? Is that a good sum up of that? Okay. All right. Yes, go ahead.
And just for the community's sake,
Oh, right before your comment, Denise, would you mind flipping to the other slide set while you're answering that way, or at least we're all queued up? Thank you.
just to reaffirm that, there's been a lot of transparent discussion about what the critical areas are for campuses. I know that I received a lot of calls when Duarte Toppin was put in a different role. People wanted to know why, what was happening. So in my own district, there were conversations about where we were and what we're doing. So I do think a lot of people are aware that we are in a critical position. But that's, again, one part of the story. And so the rest of the story is that we still saw academic growth. There's a lot of promise, but we have our work cut out for us. And I think that's what we've been continuously saying. So certainly look forward to having those continued discussions on the schools that we need to address, because we need to address them. But thank you.
I'm gonna figure out how to use a clicker. Is she just gonna hand it to me, forward and back, facing that way? Okay. All right, so that was a really good background, which thanks for that deep dive, because I think it's gonna make going through this, because you've already seen all the data that's now going to play into this. So Dr. Saunders and I worked together with Dr. Dixon to take our baseline of where we are and figure out what that, in theory, looks like 5 years out. And like we discussed, this is the SBOE framework. So we are complete with our vision. We're working on goals tonight. And then after that is when the systems and processes come in. As a board, we're going to be aligning our policies, our budget. We were talking about giving resources. That's where district will come back and ask for resources at board meetings in order to support the superintendent's strategy. Then we will monitor the progress and have accountability in order to watch these goals. So here is student outcome goal proposed number 1. Again, House Bill 3 requires an early literacy goal, and it has to be tied to meets on the 3rd grade RLA star. As Dr. Saunders showed you, 45% passing, 45% meets was our current baseline, and proposing a 60% outcome after 5 years, which is about a 3% increase. Some of these numbers, we went and looked at some of our comparable districts, so HEB, ISD, Laredo, other ones that are similar size and similar demographics, to see where a high B, low A district is in terms of their 3rd grade meets reading, and so that's where some of these numbers also came from. So that would be about 3% a year. I think I got one more slide on this one. Okay, there we go. And then as part of House Bill 3, we also have to set annual targets for every single student group, and that has to be set by the board. This projects out to get, by 2031, all of these student groups will be up where all students are, up at that 60% level. Wherever you see the word suppressed, if there are not enough students in that student group, like there's only 2, 3, 4, 10 of them, then TA does not provide that data, because otherwise you could disaggregate it down to the student too easily. So we do not have a big enough 3rd grade population of American Indian or Pacific Islanders to have targets for those. I will go back one slide then. Okay, so discussion of student outcome goal 1.
Leslie has a question.
Yes. Yeah.
For later?
No, just got, no, let's do goal by goal.
Oh,
I was just looking at it because I know like we wanted to like growth and going up. And of course, I just noticed, Asian is just consistent as 81%. So what does that mean? Like,
Oh, that means they're already over the target of 60%. So we need
so
them to
we don't
not go
need
down.
not to just go down, but like.
We could increase those if you want.
I'm just, I'm just curious why, because how like, I don't know, like I know that there's a teacher that just stuck on my mind about most of the kids are just under challenged. And for me to like, I don't know, have that consistency at 81% as long as we just not go down, but I don't know. I'm just.
No, I'm with you. My brain is just processing what it could be. We can't do 3% because otherwise they'd be over 100% and we'd get investigated for cheating. So,
I know, it's nice that we want it to be consistent and not going down. And it would be nice to like, if it does go up, but are these like?
I think it would be completely reasonable to expect to put on districts some sort of growth. Dr. Saunders, what if we raised them 1% a year and tried to get that up to 86?
Yes,
Going
ma'am.
from 81 to 86, you think that's reasonable? And make sure that everyone is addressing every student group, not just the high needs one.
I know, I'm just
that is a great, that's,
But again, I think it's important that we keep in mind that these are minimum.
Just minimum.
We're not saying, get to 81 and stop. We're saying, this is where you need to be at a minimum.
Oh, okay.
And then, if it exceeds it, then when we're looking at the progress next year, maybe we raise the end goal for 2031.
Okay.
So this is not, hey, hot dog, you got to 64 this year. No, we want you to do more, but 64 would put you on target to get
okay.
there in 2031.
Oh, okay, thank you.
What do you think, Dr. Saunders? I think it's a great catch that I think we should be moving up in I don't think any category should, even if they're already above.
If we're monitoring all groups,
Yes.
it makes sense. And Ms. Lee, to your point, do you remember the conversation earlier about when we're providing interventions, we should be providing interventions for students across Judson ISD, which means if you're already at meets, the goal is to grow you to masters. If you're at masters, maintain masters and score higher. So it makes sense.
Okay, how does everybody else feel about changing that line to go 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86? I like it. Do I see enough people? Okay. The final number being 86, because we're 5 years. So it starts,
I
our base.
understand,
Oh,
but if you, we're at 81 now.
correct.
27 would be 82, 28 would be 83, 29 would be 84. Oh, you're right, my mistake.
Okay. I used a lot of brain power in the first hour and a half, so it was entirely possible I did math wrong. So I was like really watching. Thank you. Okay.
I was thinking the last column is total, just to.
Oh, correct, yes.
Not one more year.
No, it's 1 more year, so, okay, no, I'm glad we need as many eyes as we can check in, because there's been a lot of data back and forth in the last 3 days that I'm not sure any of us can read math anymore at all. Okay, any other discussion of anything else? Yes, go ahead,
I
Laura.
have a question about where the 33% came from. And I'm going to have the same question for all categories.
Sorry, which 33?
Well, 15 points is a 33% increase from 45. So we're at 45 baseline, we want to increase 15 points, so that's a 33% increase to get to 60.
Correct. That was from looking at our 15 comparable districts, those that are up at about, scoring about an 88, like a high B, 88, 89, their average score is about a 60. So if we want to get this district up to an 88, 89 as a district, then we would need our scores to be up around a 60.
So are all the percentages, because goal 2 is 40.5%, goal 3 is 17, are those all functions of where we are with Texas,
I did it with comparable districts.
comparable districts?
Yes. So similar
Close.
EcoDis, similar SPED, similar size for those numbers.
So it's comparing how far apart we are from surrounding districts.
No, I looked at the benchmark districts within our cohort, so our relative performance group of districts that are like us, their highest performing districts, what do their scores look like? And maybe I'll see, we haven't let Dr. T talk yet. You want to take that question?
And
Because you are the accountability guy.
To explain it, so whenever you're rated based on how you do better of domain 1 or domain 2. Domain 2 also has 2 parts, so it's always good to see how other districts that are similar to yours when it comes to low socioeconomic status are doing, so you can get a better picture as to what you got to do. But at the end of the day, when you're hitting domain 1 and you're doing all these strategies, it'll let itself that you'll be able to perform better when you are truly measured with other students similar as your campus. So that's the reason why it's always good to use data similar to other districts and how they're doing to get those either high Bs or low As. It'll give you all a better picture of what you all have to plan to be able to get there. Because if you compare yourselves with, say, Katy ISD, it wouldn't be, it's not going to be fair. So if you try to get how they're doing in, let's say, domain 2 part B, and you plug the same data, it's not, you're never going to get there because it wouldn't be.
What about Texas? Is that also not really fair?
It would be fair when it comes to domain 1. Domain 1 what it does, it assesses you on performing in all exams, including alternative assessments. But it wouldn't be fair, and that's the reason why the accountability, the beauty about the accountability is that it provides you a perfect opportunity to get those Cs, those Bs, and those A's if you understand how it works. And right now, as I see you all, when I hear Madam President say that the comparative that you all employed was looking at how other districts with a similar equal disadvantaged population did, that puts you on a path to be able to get those, to increase to where you really want to increase. And it goes back to authentically doing those or planning those goals, because it goes to what TA wants from you all. So, and I'm gonna add that when we look at SMART goals, and I'm pretty sure that everybody has heard that acronym, SMART goals. TA has moved in the direction that they mandate that you all adopt SMART goals. And kind of to give you all an overview on what it means is understanding the importance of having goals that include the population. I remember, the way that I remember is like having PDBT, population, deadline, baseline, target. Like it must be in that goal, one way or the other. And it's also understanding when we look at goals and like true goals, it's the percentage growth is 6 to 8 percentage growth points. I've actually looked, and this is real, that's.
Per year or
No, like, when we.
5 year?
Yes.
6 percentage growth points for 5 years?
Depends for 5 years. Well, I wouldn't set a 6 to 8 percentage growth for 5 years, but it's a realistic goal.
It's small.
Yeah, very small. And when we look at, like, say, the growth for, like, let's say the first year, you look at all these realistic goals, you'll see that it's a 1 percentage point growth because of the fact that you are adopting a curriculum, so there's a learning curve there. Then who are you partnering to build capacity within your administrators? But going back to the goals, it's imperative that you all understand who your
Competitors.
or
our
who you're
peers.
going to be compared to, and how the accountability works to be able to plan these realistic goals.
Yeah, and to keep in mind, our goal that we had set 3 years ago in this category, well, we didn't do it specifically for third grade, but in meets, our goal was only 5% in 4 years. So we were only doing a 1% increase a year in the meets category. So this is definitely a much more aggressive goal, right? Very aggressive, but when you see how far below the state and below we are, that's, I think, Dr. Gibson, the first time he said, low-hanging fruit. Those are those kids that if you just give a little bit more time, effort, more prescriptive in your small group, like you can get those kids those 1 or 2 questions to get up, then it gets a little harder once you get past that, right? Now you're gonna move somebody from the bottom of approaches to the top of approaches and into meets versus just getting that kid just barely into meets. So these gains should be easier the first year, but then it's gonna start getting harder as you get closer to that 60%. But there's room to grow according to what the state says, so.
And it goes back to the question that Ms. Leslie had with regards to the population. It was good that you pointed out the 81,
Yes.
that it's not stagnant. But it's also realistic that if we set a goal, let's say 15 percentage growth points, it's really, are we being realistic? So when we look, because it's a lot more difficult to move up when you're already good, even though it's possible. I mean, there's always an outlier, but we have to be realistic, and the fact that you all went 1 percentage point, that's a realistic goal. And the beauty about this is that.
It's realistic.
And
Have we ever been
But if you
satisfied?
continue this graph, it wouldn't continue at 3% every year because
Yes,
as
it
we
has
get
to.
past this, it's gonna get incrementally
Yes,
harder, right?
yes, it
Then it might
plateaus.
go to, we're trying to get 2% a year, and eventually you get to a point where you're at if you just don't go down, you're happy, right? And 1% is good, but right now, we are so far below that, let's get after 3% a year.
So you see this as aggressive?
This is triple what our board set 3 years ago.
And if I may add, I want to mention, I know Dr. Saunders
Yeah.
mentioned the importance of seeing this as how are they performing at the meets. First and foremost, that's the expectation when it comes.
agreed.
But it's there, it's changing the mindset. And I love the fact that you mentioned seeing this as like a race. When you're running a race, you're approaching, but you didn't get to the line, so you're still under. So you'll need intensive. So are we really so it's about changing the mindset district-wide, that we need to have those.
I agree. I've never liked the
Expectations.
approaches thing.
Yes. So I love the fact that now you all are driving, and hopefully we'll adopt goals that are.
And I'm gonna flip 2 slides
Let
forward.
me,
Oh, sorry.
I
Go
have
ahead.
questions
Yes.
in
No, go ahead, sir.
conjunction with Ms. Stanford. A couple of things we need to all realize. One is we don't have a permanent superintendent. I can assure you, if we had a permanent sup, that would be pushed back on how aggressive these goals are, because the superintendent ultimately is responsible for those goals. So Dr. Dixon, bless you for being here, but we know you're not the long-term solution. And so we're setting this target that a new superintendent's going to come back and say, you guys, what are you doing? And that's why we've had so much contention before, because we needed to set smart goals that were realistic, not aggressive. I love aggressive goals. But as I said earlier, you can't set these goals without supporting teachers to get to those goals. And I reiterate that. We can paint this aggressive picture, but it's going to stress the rank and file teacher on how are we going to get there without additional strategies. So I'm real cautious. I wanted to go back with House Bill 3, and I didn't recall House Bill 3 mandating numbers, so I wanted just clarity. Maybe I missed that part because House Bill 3 was broad. Was there a specific number that was? Okay, so these numbers were created
Correct, based on our peer districts.
by who?
Dr. Saunders and I.
Dr.
The peer
Saunders created the
districts.
numbers?
And asked if it was
Yes, sir.
reasonable.
Okay. So I typically like to emphasize Region 20 data when looking at peer groups, because there are variables, as you mentioned. Katy ISD is not Judson ISD. There are different variables in the area. The best indicator is to use comparative districts, but also what peer districts are doing in Region 20 in our own backyard. So if we want to be the best, we need to look at what Northeast ISD is doing, Northside ISD, and kind of balance, are these numbers realistic with what our peers are doing, regardless of the economic condition of Northside or Northeast? We're still all in the same backyard. And so I don't know if Region 20 was utilized for any of this data, or if it was only those comparative districts that were mentioned earlier in Laredo and.
Well, TEA disagrees with you. They want you to use peer districts that are of similar size, demographics, and everything else. So,
Ms.
hold
Ryan,
on,
Ms.
I
Ryan.
can finish my sentence.
But I don't like that TA
Okay.
disagree with me. If
So,
they want to
I'm
call
sorry.
me and tell me, Mr. Matthias, I disagree with you,
I'm sorry,
that's
sir,
fine.
the legislature disagrees. So how we are rated and the scores we get as a school district, one of those categories where we get points is relative performance. They take our peer districts and we get points assigned by peer districts, not assigned by Region 20. They don't go find elementary schools in Region 20 and see how we did with Alamo Heights and Comal and Shirt Cibolo that look nothing like us. They take us and they find schools that are very similar to ours, and then they assign points off that. So accountability scores is what the board is held accountable for to TEA.
That's not my point, Ms. Ryan. My point is we're setting targets that are our targets. Our targets need to be realistic, and we should incorporate Region 20, regardless of who says what. We're the board that sets the targets. So setting aggressive targets is nice, but again, when we get back to how are we going to get there, that's the next part of our discussion to ensure we can get there. I don't want to set up our district for failure, if you will. We want to make sure that we're successful in reaching our goals. And so looking at peer districts is important, because I can tell you someone wanting to move into our district is going to look at what's happening at Northeast or Northside or East Central for that matter, or even Southwest ISD before they buy their home. So we got to take care of business here too. So I just wanted to know where the numbers came from, because I didn't recall there being a specific
So
metric.
there was a couple of pieces in thinking through the goals. The first piece was, remember when we were talking about the closing the gaps, those student groups. So it was really important to us, and it was the three of us, by the way, that this was a collective effort. I don't want you to think I'm just sitting here pulling numbers out of the sky, but we really wanted to look at districts that have very similar student groups to us, and where were they and where are they? So it's really like a historical look. And the reason for that is because when you think about that through line of the state of Texas and our drop pins, it is so scary to me that we have students coming out of Judson ISD that are, in some instances, 17 points below, percentage points below the state average, right? So then the next step was, let's find districts that look like us, and I understand Ms. Ryan's point, but we looked specifically at those sub-pops. Like, do you have the same percentage of special education students that we do? Do you have the same percentage of economically disadvantaged students that we do? Because I keep going back to what Dr. Gibson said. He's a man of a lot of words, but one thing really stuck to me. At some point, you've got to start that flywheel, right? Like, we've got to start that momentum going. Do I think these are attainable? Yes. Do I think that some are a heavier lift than others? Yes. I'm incredibly worried about special education. This is a huge lift. But the reality is, if we're setting a goal and each teacher looks at where their students are right now and compares it to the district goal and sets their student growth goal and meets their student growth goal, then we actually raise the water level for every kid in Judson ISD. And so I feel like that starts the flywheel. I feel you.
And Dr.
I am
Saunders-
equally as nervous.
And I'm not trying to say that I don't want to reach these goals.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Kenorik, we went back and forth, love her to death. I want high goals. That is exactly what I want. And I will probably end up supporting these goals, but it's only one part of the
Yeah,
process.
I agree.
It's not the end, and so we can't just leave here and say, okay, we set some great goals. Well, then what next? What next do we need to do? And so they have to be viable. That's
Yes,
all
sir.
I have to say. They
Yes,
really
sir.
need to get to where we're getting teacher input, and I'm telling you that getting teacher input on their success is something you guys are responsible for, but I feel is imperative to really break this systemic issue that we're seeing in some of our areas. So anyway, part of
Yes,
the
sir.
process. Thank you.
With you, Dr. Dixon, since you're a superintendent, you've been superintendent many years, many different places. As a superintendent, how would this strike you, knowing as you're coming in that you're going to be evaluated?
Mr. Macias thinks I don't have skin in the game, and I've got more skin than y'all, because every district I leave, it impacts my reputation. Fredericksburg got their first A that they've ever had this week. Theirs were rescored, and it was 87 was all they could ever do. And yeah, I was only there 6 months, but I made changes, and the changes were, we're not gonna stay the same. If you keep doing the same thing, you're gonna get the same results. And they had done the same thing. If you know Fredericksburg, they've done the same thing forever. But
Well, it's a natural thing to do.
exactly. I am not afraid of aggressive goals at all. I was the first, back when it was recognized exemplary and all that, Somerset was the first recognized school district in Bexar County. 99% economically disadvantaged and 98% Hispanic. That's not important to me. It's a kid, you know. And I don't care what color they are. The special ed here is our, and I'm going to tell you, we've gotten Dr. Armistead, we've had her in cabinet yesterday. We've got to do something different there.
Yeah.
Because they've got lots and lots and lots of staff, and we're not sure we're using it right. And so she's going to look at those things. She's going to look at the co-teach, the inclusion, and I think. And I was here last year when, I can't remember what happened, but y'all didn't make your goal. You had a goal and y'all didn't get it, or you hadn't gotten it in years, and I didn't understand that. So that's never happened to me, where I've set a goal and didn't get it. And I've always thought if the board told you to do it, you're gonna do it. That's where I come from.
Well, as a superintendent, would you have some input?
I would-
Like if you thought it was unrealistic,
Yes,
you would say so.
Yes.
So
I
I'll
would.
be interested in your input on each level. because-
I think this is good, and I think it's attainable. My concern is that 3% is from, if you go back to the original chart, that 45 was meets. So to get up to 60 meets now, you've got to bring all those approaches kids up. So it's not just 3% of the kids. I mean, it's huge gains for those approach kids. And as a superintendent, I will answer, that would be if you set that goal for me, I'm going to be out there finding tutors in campus. How are they going to reorganize their staff to meet those kids' levels? That's where I would be as a
So finding the resources to support the teachers.
and not so much finding it, sometimes it's reorganizing it. You've got to put, I've been telling y'all this since I've been here. It's the classroom that is more important than the hallways or the offices or the playground. And I don't care how you criticize me. I'm gonna have a certified teacher in those classrooms. If they have to come out of an office, if I have to pay a private company, if I have to whatever, because that's been, I think, our gap. When I hear somebody get up at that podium and say, please bring back somebody because you can have a long-term, you had a long-term sub in a class last year, just put a long-term sub back in there. Boy, that didn't go with me at all.
It's not a goal.
So I think as we make those changes, and when the reward is going to be, the teachers are going to see the progress. When the teachers see it, the challenge, they're going to want more. They're going to want more. And and I've talked with, I would like to do some kind of campus incentive, make it a team thing. We're all in this together. We told you about Dr. Hinojosa at South San. He went up 10 points. The district went up 10, not 3, 10. And those campuses all got their money. And not just one person, not just a target group, not somebody who just had this pop. It was the whole campus. And so, and I don't know if they didn't have the financial stress we're in. So they could do some of that. They eliminated all their coordinators. They eliminated almost all of their district office staff. And not that they eliminated all the people. They repurposed them to the campuses. And then the money went with it. The money went to the campuses too. And we have enough models out there. When I was at Midland, they had 38 campuses, 19 were DNF. And now look at them. They're doing great. They refocused. They did, I think they closed some schools. I'm not sure. Didn't they close some schools? And we just got to give, I'm not afraid of a goal. I'm not afraid. If I don't make it, I'll also say I didn't make it. Nothing happened last year when you didn't make it, I guess. But
Well, he wasn't here
Oh,
to
well,
evaluate.
And actually, the scores went up, right, from a 69 to 71. So he actually did do well. So I will tell you.
The composite didn't, it
But
stayed at 71.
let me just tell you,
so.
Dr. Dixon, you won't be here in the long run. And it's not disrespectful. I respect you, but the goal.
She is please treat her as if she is
Oh,
the
I'm letting her
superintendent
know
right now. No,
that
sir, you've made a number of
interrupting
comments disparaging her.
You're interrupting
Sir,
me.
I'm not going to allow you to disparage the
I
superintendent.
am not. I just said I
Do
respect her.
not start a sentence with she's not going to be
You
here
can't
long.
tell me
Make
what I
your
can start my
statement, sir.
sentence with.
Okay,
Just be
go ahead and
quiet.
disrespect her then.
So,
Go ahead.
so Dr. Dixon, my concern though is historically, all the superintendents, which have been 4 that I've worked with here at Judson, were very concerned about aggressive metrics because there was some concern. I'll be very interested to see how the focus in the classroom goes because that is different, right? And at the end of the day, I'm hopeful it works and that we're having a different conversation in August about what the results were. But it's scary. And so that's why I have some concern because the support that I'm saying that our employees need at the campuses tends to come from people who are at the admin level. And if we're not supporting them, I'm a little worried. And then my last thought is that South San is small. South San may have jumps, and that's great, but the incentive idea that you're proposing, our district is extremely diverse. And so you take a campus like Hopkins, Hartman, Candlewood, and you look at Olympia, Selma, you see differences. And so awarding a campus an incentive when things are different on each campuses, which means the level of support that's needed needs to be equitable. And so you would have to make sure that Candlewood and Pashal and they had the same or even more resources to reach the end goal than, say, Selma or, I mean, we're all a family, I get it, but there's different economic demographics at play. And so I'm afraid that an incentive would award a campus like Olympia or Selma much more than it would be down south. And so I'm a little concerned about that. So I'd like to know more about how we would create a platform for it's equitable.
That's not on the agenda, so we can't.
Well,
There's only
and
so
you
much.
could-
We don't have it put together yet.
You brought it up, Dr. Dixon, that's why I wanted, but just so you know my sentiment on that.
Could I react to one thing? Sir, we're giving support to the campuses. You say that in every meeting. They are getting support. If they're not getting the support they got last year, or didn't get the support last year, I don't know. I wasn't here. They are getting the support. I go to the school. I ask every principal, what do you need? You call anyone that I've been so far. If they've told me they needed something, ask them if I gave it to them or not. 100%.
And that's fair. And so, like I said, my apprehension is the amount of changes and the feedback that I have received. But at the end of the day, what does the data say? And so we certainly will look at that.
That's right. Dr. Terry, you had your hand raised a long time ago,
just
so I'm passing it back to you.
so, full disclaimer, so my job is to partner with board trustees. So I respect you're holding yourself accountable for the task. But in full transparency, when it comes to the role and responsibility of a school board, as per the Texas Education Code 11.1515, that's oversight of academic achievement and strategic leadership to maximize student outcomes. So one of the responsibilities as the entrusted individuals for your community is to put forward goals. That's your responsibility. Superintendent does not have a say-so in the goals, but I love it that she takes ownership, like every superintendent should. But the goal of the task of adopting goals, that's the board. I do want to mention the importance of adopting SMART goals, because it's become very cliche with SMART goals. And you look at across the state, you look at even A-rated districts that are more fluent, that pretty much the teachers don't have to do anything. The kids come with that background knowledge. They'll have goals that are not even aligned. They're not SMART goals. And I mentioned SMART goals because then the question is, how did you all come up with these goals? Well, there has to be a baseline. Where did you get the baseline? What measuring tool does the Texas Education Agency mandate that you all use? The STAR. So when we can, and I mention all these because that's my job is to partner with you all and help you. Okay, the reason why you all came up with these goals was because the baseline that you all employed was through STAR. And the measuring tool that you all will use to see if it's growing or not will be something aligned or heavily aligned to what we know as the TEKS, which is what you guys will be assessing at the STAR. It's not about, I know Madam President used aggressive, but it's about being real goals, attainable goals. And if you've seen what's coming up or being rolled down from the state with Commissioner Mike Morath, is that they will be creating a system that with a click of a button, they will be able to see if your goals are aligned to what they mandate. I know I love the fact that I heard that you all were a Lone Star governance trained board.
We were before 5 of us were on the board.
Okay, so you all should be, I'm pretty sure that it'll sound like you'll be familiar with how to adopt goals, what it has to have, and once you all adopt these goals, it'll be Dr. Dixon's responsibility to provide growth progress measures to see if you're moving. I know you also mentioned.
Hold on, we got that on the slide.
Yeah, that you didn't know if they were moving or not. That's the beauty about it, that once you adopt the goals, it's important to, they're living goals. Like, it's not about adopting the goals and then you follow the goals, which is what a lot of districts do. But yes, that's the task that you all have as board members, to adopt the goals regardless of, because that's the person you all selected to realize that vision of yours. So if I'm a superintendent, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to want goals that are very achievable. But am I doing a service to, and you all have been entrusted with the most important element in a family, which is the students, to be able to prepare them for this ever-changing, ever-evolving private and public sector. If you leave it to the discretion of Superintendent Dr. T, hey, let's grow 3 points, 5 years, I secure my contract, but am I doing a disservice to the community? I'm gonna tell you, I would. So kind of think about that, but the responsibility comes on, it lays on you all to adopt. Again, cliche, SMART goals, but having those elements to be able to fulfill the responsibility you bear as trustees.
And I think it's important messaging in districts looking for superintendents also, because I wouldn't want the next superintendent to not believe in our kids, to not believe that we can do this. If someone doesn't think we can do this, please don't apply at Judson.
Who said we don't believe in our kids? I just need clarity on that.
I'm sorry. I said, listen to the word, sir, before you interrupt.
Please clarify.
I would not want the next superintendent to not believe that our kids can achieve this. I wouldn't want the next superintendent to not believe that our staff, if properly resourced and properly led, is capable of this. If they don't believe in this, then they probably shouldn't apply for our position, right? They walk in knowing what the standard is and knowing, and we're going to be looking for someone who's going to improve student outcomes for our kids. And this is the vision we have. We want our kids going to A and B campuses. We want them going to college, military, or industry-based certifications. These are all the things we want for them when they leave. And I really hope the next superintendent believes in those same things that our board believes in. We spent a lot of time listening to our community, putting that stuff together. So this is kind of the follow-on to that, what Dr. Tia just brought up, which is you don't just set them and forget them and put them in the bottom desk drawer, right? It's all about progress monitoring, and that is something our board has not done great in the last year because we've been really busy with other stuff, to our defense. But this is the year where we are going to do our oversight job and progress monitor. So how we see this roll out in board meetings in a much better calendar than we've done in the last couple of years is we're going to see BOI, MOI, EOI, interim, stars, and all of these other measurement instruments. And we're going to be watching that across the year with this slide deck and watch how it builds toward that third grade meets. We just don't wait for them to take the third grade STAR test and be like, oh, I hope they get meets, right? We're going to see if they're moving that progress. So things we're going to be looking for as a board then as we monitor are we seeing those kids moving up to approaches and then up to meets and up to masters? Because in order to move that needle, you've got to see more of them into approaches so that you could get more of them into meets. We're going to be watching when we see the numbers jumping with SPED and ECO-DIS from one interim to the other, then we need those increases to be more because those are the gaps that we're trying to close. When we see the kinder through second scores come out, and they're going up, are we actually seeing third grade go up, or are those not the right measurement tools? Are those not predictive of kids accelerating through meets? So this is what how the board then monitors and holds the superintendent and the staff accountable for the outcomes that we set, because we only set the outcomes. We don't set the how. They figure out the how. We just set what outcomes we want for our students.
Well, Dr. T did mention that it's not really relevant what the superintendent wants. The board sets these goals. You said that just a second ago. So the superintendent has to apply our goals, whatever they might be. I tend to believe that, but really the superintendent's part of the team. So as part of the team and being the subject matter expert, we should listen to the superintendent to develop realistic goals together. Otherwise, the board would manage the district. That's not our goal. Our objective is to put strategic planning together. So the superintendent will always be critical in helping us achieve what we think are realistic numbers and goals. That's how it's supposed to be. So that's what I'm hopeful we'll be able to do, and the next superintendent will come in and have some input based on their leadership, which is applicable. So no way in this world am I not supportive of better goals. I'm just supportive of ensuring that we support our teachers to get there. And Dr. Dixon, we'll talk more about that privately, about what that means, because I just want to feel that level of confidence. Anytime we eliminate staff to the degree that we did, it makes me feel there's holes. And since I don't manage day-to-day operations, I'm not going to know exactly what that looks like now. I just know we just let a lot of personnel go last year. And so I'll come to you to get a better sense of that. But let's move forward with aggressive goals. I like it, but like I said earlier to Dr. Saunders, this is just part of the process.
I saw Ms. Jones waving me down, or no?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
I just wanted to touch on a little bit, it's kind of gone back and forth, so it may backtrack just a tad. But I constantly think about what Dr. Saunders said with, we're not here to make adults comfortable. Having a goal of 1% a year is doing a disservice to our students. Just by seeing the graphs of how far behind they are in the state of Texas, that's embarrassing. It's hard to hear, but it's true. And we have to be aggressive to get our students to the point they need to be. These numbers align with our peer districts. That means it's the same demographics, they're working with the same money, they're working with the same staff. If they're doing it, there's no reason why we can't. Just going back to saying it would be easy for Olympia to meet it and not Hopkins, I don't believe it. Those kids eat the same, they both have to eat, they both put their clothes on the same way, they all go sit in school to learn by certified teachers. You put those children in the classroom with a certified teacher teaching the material, they are gonna learn that material. And that's proven by our peer districts that are knocking it out of the park with A ratings. Some of them even more economically disadvantaged than we are. And they're even higher rated in an A. So we have to stop with excuses. And if this is going to be something that may be that a superintendent is not comfortable with, I don't want that superintendent. Because a goal is not supposed to be something that you obtain easily. It's something that you have to work hard for. And our students deserve it. And I believe the teachers that we have, just hearing from Dr. Saunders and Dr. Dixon being on the campuses, they're there teaching, they're ready to teach. The students are showing up, they're ready to learn. We have to stop making excuses. If there's something that's missing, Dr. Dixon has said she's here to make it available. We have these LIFT grants with the Carnegie people working with the staff. We can't use excuses anymore. The excuses have to go. We have the students in the classrooms, we have the teachers there to teach. We have to get to business. We have to be aggressive. Anything else is a disservice to our students, and that's not acceptable anymore.
Okay, any other comments on student outcome goal 1? We do have 3 more goals and 4 guardrails, so.
Right, just in general, just a quick.
On 1, yes.
In general, is this also a evaluation tool?
Correct, yes. If we had a permanent superintendent that we had to do an evaluation on,
This would
this
be it.
feeds your superintendent evaluation. Yeah, 100%. Okay, I'm gonna keep rolling on to 2 then. 2 is math. That is also another 15% increase. Our peer districts that are in the 80s are at about 52 on their meets on math. And this is just 3rd grade. This is what the, I was gonna say, I'm gonna preview Leslie's comment. Can we do, Dr. Saunders, do you think it would be reasonable to, what do you think would be reasonable for the Asian population?
I think it's just be consistent. If it's the same thing we.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody disagree with raising that to? 1% a year. An extra 1% a year just on the Asian, because I think they're the only ones that were above the 52 already. Okay, so that would be, I don't have my glasses on anymore. So that would be 75 next year, 76, 77, 78, with a 79 then in 2031. Okay, and then the progress measures were pretty much the same for those, which will be BOI, MLI, EOI, for whichever the relevant measurement instrument is, because kinder takes I think TXKEA. And then as many interim we can get from the state, which I think is usually 2, November and February. But then the next part of this is putting together this monitoring calendar with all of these reports and making sure they're in the right month, and that'll drive our board agendas after that. Okay, any other questions or comments on student outcome goal 2 for math meets 3rd grade?
If anything, just to eliminate any ambiguity, let's include on the actual goal, include the actual baseline, a year. So if it says by June, that's your target date.
Yep.
So the baseline year, month and year would be meets grades level or above on STAR mathematics will increase from 37% August or whenever you all got the data.
Okay.
August of 2026 to 52%.
Okay, that's got to be on there?
Yes. So just to be in
pull up
compliance
the
with
TA
House Bill
slides.
3, it must have a PDBT population, which would be your 3rd grade students. Your deadline,
So you could say something like the percentage of grade 3 students scoring meets grade level or above on STAR mathematics will increase from 37% in August 2026 to 52% in June 2031.
And just for the record, I literally copy and paste that off the TA slide.
yes,
Sorry.
and
If my wording is wrong, then
No,
TA
and
is
it's-
wrong,
no,
and I'm
and
fine
it's-
with that too, but
it's good because
23rd.
they did make a mistake. So
They
I
did?
just want to
Okay.
make, yes, they did.
no, I've already
That's
taken,
just, that's a little tweak.
I've taken parental rights training, they don't make
Put
any
the dates in
mistakes.
there.
Sorry, too soon? So,
PDBT. So I always make sure it has a population, deadline, which in this case, you have it.
So that's the dates.
okay, sorry, Suzanne, could you repeat what you said he said?
The percentage of grade 3 students scoring meets grade level or above on STAR math or reading or whatever
Yep.
will increase from 37% in August,
Of 2026.
yeah,
2026.
2026 to 52% by June 2031.
Yes.
So if you just insert those 2 dates, move the June 2031 to the very end and stick in the one after 37%, after the baseline. Yeah, do it to all the
All
goals.
of them.
Yes.
And it'll be on 3rd grade math, 3rd grade reading, and CCMR.
whatever it is.
Add those dates. Okay, what was B and T?
B is baseline, which in this case, you already have the baseline year and month and year. So that's what you were missing, baseline.
All right, is everybody understanding
And
that
target.
change? So when we vote on it, you know what we're voting on? Okay. Because I'm not reading all this in a motion at any point. Okay. All right, so I've got that. We'll do the same wording on that one and increase the Asian 74 to 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, sorry. I read it right now. Okay, any other questions or comments on student outcome goal 2? Or the growth progress measures. Okay. Then 3 is CCMR. We were sitting pretty good at 80.8, but district thinks 95 is completely achievable. And I know we've talked about this a lot as a board too, when we're walking around at the holding area at graduation, the kids who are not wearing a single thing. There shouldn't be a single kid back in that holding area that is not wearing a yellow cord. Like, you've got to go do something. When you leave, you got to do something. And it's education is the great equalizer. Doesn't matter where you come from or what your circumstances are. Every door is open to you, and there are 50 plus doors, 100 doors to choose from. You got to pick one of them. And we got to be able to get kids, 95% of the kids, through a door, no matter what that is, whether that's military, career, or college. We got to. That's our responsibility in public education. Otherwise, I'm not sure why we exist if we can't get them one thing before they leave. So that's what those targets look like. And I'll change the wording on that also to be the same syntax as the previous two. Okay, this is what it looks like for the demographic groups.
How come we didn't have Pacific Islanders before and all of a sudden we got them?
Because there weren't enough third graders to disaggregate, but when we take all the high school graduates, there is enough. There's not enough in foster care or apparently graduating American Indians from 2025. So I'm sure some years we do, because we have a small population, but, all right, did any of these not, okay, these are all under the 95, so everybody goes up on this one.
Except GT, and I don't think you can increase it above 99. I'm sorry, that's just not realistic.
Which line is that on? Oh, there it is, I see it, they're in the middle. Can someone go find out who that one kid was?
It's probably more than one, but again, 100% is
Okay.
just not realistic.
Correct. It's pretty close.
That means no kid
Yes, correct. Yes, let's see, you never know. Some weird always happens with some kid somewhere, so.
It's not one kid. Okay. It's 1%.
But that's out of the graduates in a year, so we're talking still only one or two kids that did not.
I know, but it seems a little odd that if you are a GT kid, you didn't hit
You have
one of
GT
these
kids,
measures.
you know
Exactly.
that there are some who are going off to like start a moon colony, right? And they think they don't need any of this.
Yeah, but still,
Right?
they typically still stumble across it anyway.
Yeah, there's one or two that will not.
Because whenever they're assessed, and usually we have kind of this notion that it's in math and reading, and but they might be GT in something else. Kind of think
That's
about
true.
it when, I don't know, Howard Gardner's
Yeah.
multiple intelligence?
We got arts kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
RT or,
And they have just, some GT kids have no interest in
That's fair.
the common paths. But we're going to work harder for every kid is what we're going to
Yes.
do. So, all right, any other questions or comments on outcome goal 3? These were here's the progress measures for those. So keeping track of our kids who are taking TSI, and I know our counselors at the high schools are giving the TSI test all the time. Really looking at the number of kids that are enrolled in our AP and our dual credit, and any of that advanced coursework and earning that. Kids in IBC programs. Another thing I know the Finance Committee and Dr. Dixon and I had talked about too, which is those early CTE pathways. Because if you get in and start your level 1 in 7th or 8th grade, your chance of completing through level 4 and getting your IBC has now grown astronomically. It's also, if I decide I want to be a nurse at Judson High School, but I wait till my freshman year to take principles of, is it humans? I don't remember what the level 1 is for that. And my freshman year, I decide I hate nursing and I don't want to do nursing and I want to switch to cosmetology. That boat has sailed. So when kids get to take their level 1 or level 2 in middle school, they can then have a better chance of knowing if they want to move on to the level 2, 3, and 4 of that path or change, because kids dropping out of a pathway because it's too late to get into another pathway is another reason for non-completion of CCMR also. And then really keeping an eye on those sped babies all the way through when they graduate. So, and that was something our community meetings brought up a lot too, is we often focus on a lot of different students and different activities and always keeping our sped students and that entire pipeline from 3-year-olds at ECSE up through adult years, and making sure we have goals and are focused on them also. All right, so any other questions on the goals or goal progress measures for goal 3? Okay, then goal 4 gets to be one of our own. That's not dictated. They recommend you could add 2, but at some point that becomes when we're just doing this for the first time. One extra one is good enough, I think. I think that's what Esperanza said. Yes. So the other proposed one is staying very student focused, is our kids deserve to attend an A-rated campus. That's what they deserve. And we need to move as many students as we can to A and B rated campuses. Not by moving them all to Crestview, because you don't have any room left, but by our campuses. And this goes into what?
Increasing the number of AP.
Correct. And then the number, but you track that by number of students too, right? Because you can have an A-rated, I mean, God bless JLA, I love y'all with an A, but that services X number of kids, versus when you can move your bigger campuses up to that A and B, that's more kids now being serviced by an A or B rated campus. And truly, I don't think 50% is high enough on this one. I don't think that's aggressive at all, because I think 100% of our kids should go to an A or a B, but I'm also trying to be realistic, and goals can always be moved forward later and higher, because I do think we're going to get to it before that. But, and this goes back to Laura with the marketing and stuff. I mean, that's what you put on a billboard, is all A and B rated campuses. And guess what? They'll come back then. You got to have something to market, and A and B rated campuses are something to market to, because it means we're getting student outcomes done for kids.
We have some stuff to make.
We have some, no, I know. But remember, the average parent is just going on to School Digger and looking up a score and making their educational decisions that way, unfortunately, sometimes. And so, but if you look at the number of kids, the student outcomes of kids who attend A and B campuses, and the student outcomes of kids on D and F campuses, it is dramatically different, especially when you're looking at 6-year post-secondary rates of those kids. Go ahead, I see Dr. Saunders hit her
Yes,
button.
because I would be really upset with myself if I didn't say something about this goal. This is my absolute favorite out of all the goals we've talked about tonight, because this strikes at one of my core beliefs, which is that your academic experience should not depend on zip code. And that's 100% what this speaks to. The fact that your neighborhood school, you are bound, some students are bound to that neighborhood school because of the circumstances of their family. I also will say, as a former principal, the fact that we as Judson ISD are creating a space where leaders can function at an A, B, or C rated campus is remarkable, because the heavy lift of being a leader at a D or F rated campus and moving that work forward is difficult. It makes you a dynamic leader, but I'm telling you from experience, it takes years off your life. That work is hard. I would love for you guys to look at this goal and just say, this is who we in Judson ISD want to be. Because in reality, what it says is, regardless of where you live, we are going to provide you with the best academic experience we possibly can. This is my favorite one. And Ms. Stanford, this is the number that we were talking about earlier. So 29% of our students, you were asking how many attend a D or F rated campus.
Yeah, sorry for the confusion. Those are not the targets in the middle, that's our current, I'm sorry, for the slide building. That is what we are currently at, and the goal is 50% in green and 50% in yellow and 0 in the red as a minimum goal. I'm looking to see if we have another, oh yeah, the GPMs is, there's, again, everything else we're doing, and we'll feed this. So we'll track that each year. But that's a goal. Questions or comments on that goal? Go ahead, Laura.
So I calculated that the way more students are going to go to more ABC schools is to have more, right? So it just seemed to me that based on the numbers from our other report, I figured that our AB campuses have to go from 25.9% to 51.8%, and our C campuses have to go from 40.7% to 48.1%. And by doing that, we'll get rid of Ds and Fs. That equals 100% of all our campuses.
And remember, some of those campuses within the even D and C range are by 1 point. So for example, Hartman is currently a 69. So, well, that was a bad example, but yes. So, yeah, yes. But I'm saying some are by 1 point on for the total domain score. So, I mean, it's attainable, I think. I'm just going to go, I realize I'm not on the board, but I do have to say this because this is my 30th year in Judson. So this is important to me.
I love this.
Every single student deserves the same academic outcomes regardless of where you live. And if we believe that in our heart, we have to put it to paper.
I would just like to see, to me, it would be more clear to say by June 2031, we have, our AB campuses have gone from 25.9% to 51.8%.
The goal is not written by campuses. The goal is based on students. It is our percentage of kids that are served by the campuses, because we don't service buildings.
But we have to have those. That's where it's going to come from. We have to provide more of those campuses to offer to the students. It's just a more understandable goal to me than tracking, because we could meet this goal a little bit by moving students. They can't all go to Crestview.
Correct.
But
we're full on most of our A campuses are, well, JEC is
Right.
full, JLA is
Right.
limited, and Crestview is literally full.
So the only way to satisfy this is to increase the campuses,
Correct.
right?
Correct, but it's by percentage. So if you have a 400 student campus that goes up to a B, that is drastically different than Wagner going to a B. Wagner going to a B, now there are 2,200 students now going to B-rated campus. Go RC, let's go. Always a T-bird. That's different than an elementary that might only have 400 students at it this year. That's 400 more students that are a B. Let's get 20, we want 2,200.
So does that mean we're going to focus on the biggest campuses, the largest campuses?
I think
No.
it's the second part of the goal that really resonates for me. No students in Judson ISD will attend a D or F-rated campus.
Which means we don't have any.
Correct.
So, okay, it's just,
But you write your goal with a student focus, not a building focus. That's what they teach you in all the stuff at TA, right?
That's the reason behind the population.
yeah, it's not a building goal, it's a,
It's the way the system of grade schools, to give an example,
Yeah.
writes it, is they don't, you are going to increase the number of buildings, and that could be something that we speak about when we talk about the number of AB campuses in the future. But the way systems of grade school, we write our North Star goal as being the number of students sitting in an A or B campus. If we get 50% of our students in an A or B campus, we have to increase the number of buildings. I understand what you're saying, that the number of campuses is a little bit easier to
Yeah.
comprehend when you're thinking
Yeah.
of that, but it is student focused. And so when we say the numbers of students sitting, right now, the number of students sitting in our A and B campuses is much lower than our C-rated campuses. And it's almost, it's not even 10% difference from our DF campuses. That's why they look at it that way.
yeah. I just wouldn't want us to focus on the heavier populated
No.
schools, because that would help us meet this goal
Yes,
quicker.
no, and when you think about it from the lens of what we were looking at with trends and the way we're looking at these goals measuring out through 2031, is that as each grade level grows, it's just inherently going to affect the larger schools because our high schools are larger. But
Right.
but as we grow the students, say our fifth graders, as we go on through middle school, which are larger, and then they all come together at the high school, which are our largest population, it just inherently hits it more. But in the end, it's that school quality. So as long as the students are experiencing success along their academic careers, then they'll land at an A or B campus.
Right.
And no superintendent would pit the schools against each other. I can't imagine saying, no, I'm only going to work at my high schools because that's 6,000 of the 20,000.
Right, right.
I don't think that.
I just,
Yeah, I know the
personally,
numbers. I know
it's just easier to grasp and just more sensible to me, so that's the only thing I had.
And accountability will always force us to look at number of campus, no matter what, we're going to be doing that. But when we sit down as a board and say, are we improving outcomes for kids being on an A or B rated campus, and the outcomes that come with an A and B rated campus means everybody there is scoring higher, is a better outcome for students. I think it's how you measure that. Okay.
Let me
Go ahead, sir.
also chime in. Just speaking it in existence, I don't think anyone on this board is implying that we don't want aggressive goals. We certainly don't think our students are unable to achieve. They can. I've dealt a lot in my work in the nonprofit world with students in poverty, with parents in poverty, and there is a distinct difference. And not to say they're incapable, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there are challenges of single-family homes, grandparents raising kids. There are unique challenges that are real because we've seen performance in those schools go up and down a bit. So I've always said you need to have a strong superintendent, you need to have strong principal, you need to have teachers with experience, you need to have all of those things, and a solid board with strategic direction to move a district. Because I can't do it by myself, neither can Ms. Ryan. And of course, not a principal, not a superintendent. It takes all these pieces coming together. And I can tell you, Dr. Saunders, you said you had 30 years. I've been here 16 years, and I can tell you every board I was on since 2010 wants our district to achieve. So the goal is always to get to that point where we have no C or D campuses or F campuses. And we don't want to fail our community. I take it even more so because over 83% of our district is black and brown. This is a future generation of minorities that need to be prepared, and that is a real thing. So we have a responsibility, and I'm willing to put as much resources to making sure that happens. But I recognize it's not going to happen just because we say it. There is real work that needs to happen, and I'm ready to get to work on that.
Okay. What partners with goals is guardrails or constraints. So there's terminology going back and forth. They used to be called constraints, and they kind of still are under Lone Star governance, but TEA, Garrett Black, as are transitioning over. They like guardrail better. Apparently constraint didn't sound so good. So it is now written multiple ways. They're using the words interchangeably within education currently at the moment. So I've made them slashes, so whenever they do decide to change officially the terminology or decide something, they're on there. So unlike a goal, which is something you must do, guardrail or constraint is something the superintendent is not supposed to do. And they described it at our conference of it's the bumpers at the bowling alley. Where it's like, you got to get down and knock down the pins. You can't, these are the bumpers, and you can't go outside of those. So these were put together based on the community input from the community input meetings, right? There were so many things that people had written all over the boards, which are not necessarily just basic numbers, go from 45 to 60. These are the things that our community felt and staff felt were very important in our schools. So the first one of these has to do with the learning environments our kids are in, and that the superintendent shall not allow it to be unsafe, disorderly, disrespectful, or insufficiently supportive of students' well-being and learning. So obviously the converse of that is superintendent needs to make sure it's safe, it's orderly, people are being respectful, kids are supported and learning.
So why can't it be written positive?
That is, you can't. That is not Lone Star governance, and that's not TEA.
Show me.
It's Lone Star governance. Call Garrett Black.
So it can't say the superintendent shall
No,
allow
it is a
students
negative.
to learn?
Oh, sorry. I didn't hold it up. Sorry. Nope. Constraints, guardrails are negative.
See, to me, a guardrail is something positive, not negative.
Well, constraint is always structured to be negative.
Yes.
It's something that cannot happen, it's a red line. But constraints are not required, last I knew. You have goals, and then you can have constraints if you wish
Okay.
as well.
Well, we can argue it, but 3 of us were just spent 2 days at TEA, so am I wrong?
And they said it has to be negative?
Yes. And there, and yes. Yes,
Well, if
it is.
it was
That's just the way it
this,
is.
it'd be all of them.
They are all in negative.
Yeah.
They are all. There are 4 negative ones.
And-
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't make the rules,
Now,
ma'am.
see, I would
just
rather
follow
the
them.
board tell me what to do
I know.
than not.
I agree.
Correct. I agree, and you can take it up with the commissioner.
So what they say, you don't have goals, you just have constraints?
No. You have student outcome goals of what the outcomes you want for students, but for her, she's then going to take actions to achieve those outcomes, right? But she can only do those actions within the following constraints. These are the things she can't do while trying to get more third graders to do math. You can't do it and then be unsafe. You can't do it and it be disorderly in the schools. I don't make up the, I literally didn't make this up.
I'm curious
yeah.
as to why absenteeism is here, because I don't think that that really flows with unsafe, disorderly, that kind of thing.
So kids who feel supported generally go to school more. If they feel unsupported, you see more chronic absenteeism from kids who report that they don't feel like they're part of their school community. Look, we're backup band over here. Oh, there we go. There's. And sometimes guardrails constraints are harder to measure too.
I just
You've got to find.
That's going to be impossible to put in a superintendent's evaluation.
Correct, and that's why you come up with, and we've had the same thing in previous superintendents when we were LSG, that you do find ways to measure certain things. So we have questions on our TASB staff survey. We give a parent survey twice a year. We used to give the kid survey, but thanks House Bill 2, we can't figure out how to do that yet. Although we might, because I signed a consent form, so we might be back to doing the kid surveys. But we have been doing those for 3+ years, and we were getting 2 data points a year. So student sense of belonging, we were able to actually measure that because we had like 3,000-4,000 kids taking that survey.
What do you think about that? Do you think we should be negative and say, don't do this, don't do that? Or do you think we should say, this is what we want you to do?
Well, what I think, to be in compliance, it has to be written. To be in compliance, it has to be written in that manner. So what I think really wouldn't matter, but if I were a superintendent, so when it comes to this, I remember when I was a deputy, chronic absenteeism, we would always, the way that I would, when I would speak to the principals, is that if we always had a 94% district-wide goal. So if it went above that 6%, I'm already looking at the principals. So that was kind of my I would draft my own goals to try to make sure that I'm addressing what I need to address. Obviously, I wouldn't, whenever I was coaching my principals, it was always I would be more positive, but that's how they're supposed to be written to be in compliance.
Your absentee goal, you had to say,
So
our attendance will not go below 94, instead of saying attendance will be 94 or higher.
Yes.
I
Yes.
know.
Okay.
Somebody probably got a contract for Lone Star Governance and got paid a lot of money to come up with doing it this way, but this is the way they do it.
When did it become a rule to do it this way? Was that in House Bill 3, or when did it become the
It's not a
required-
rule, it is TA's recommendation on governance in school
Yes.
districts. Strongly, strongly recommended. / brainwashing.
I mean,
Dr.
for years?
Lone Star Governance will go in depth as to like dictating the format of how you need to draft all of those. If you've gone through the ISO, the Evaluating Improvements and Outcomes, it'll also mention the importance. Obviously, it's a 3 hours.
And it recommends everything be done
Everything from
in-
the.
in the negative, which is,
No, the guardrails constraints are the only things that are
Yeah, only
negative.
those, but from the.
well, that's what I meant, everything,
In this, yes, these 4.
They're very straightforward. So what they found is that they need to, we know what I know Dr. Sanchez mentioned earlier about the systemic. Yeah, if it's not working, it's because we have systematically created a system that if, let's say, if the district succeeds, the leader has failed to put forward system structures in place to provide ongoing success, that when he or she leaves, it'll go down. So what TA has now put forward is through the revamping of Lone Star Governance and ISO is we have to work with trustees to build capacity when it comes to being very specific from the things such as understand that the goals is you own them, and she owns goals progress measures, from how to specifically draft the goals, from how to specifically draft the goals progress measures, everything, and it's very,
Well, I understand a constraint is always in the negative.
yes.
It's a red line.
Now, if you ask me why they did it, was because, okay, we have all these districts that are failing to provide equitable academic opportunities, thus equating to B or F campus, and you have to be straightforward. This is what you're doing that's causing the whole system to fail, and it includes these, but if we sugarcoat it, they're not getting the hint that that's where
I wouldn't call it sugarcoating, but what I'm wondering is, has it always been that way with Lone Star governance, that they say you have some goals and you have to have constraints?
I wouldn't be able to tell you because if it's always been that way, but the revamping, they're very.
Correct.
They're very straightforward.
They're requiring
Yeah, this is back
that you
to-
define constraints.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's some grants I think district is looking at for next year that may also require full Lone Star governance. So this year's kind of like our dip our toe back in unofficially into Lone Star governance, because if we get picked up for some of these grants, and this came up 2 years ago because we did apply for some grants last year, and we were going to have to, we didn't end up getting the grant, so we didn't jump back in at that time. But districts need to be prepared to jump back in Lone Star
And you all
governance.
notice this through the targeted improvement plans, where you have to include, like, it's, if you want to get the funds, you have to be very specific as to how you're drafting those targeted improvement plans for those campuses that are in those situations. So what they're doing right now is they want to align everything. Because districts say they want to produce this, but yet the goal is this, and the vision is this, but your mission is this, and you don't have a student portrait or portrait of a graduate. And even they're pushing to have any portrait of the adult, because they're firm believers, and you'll see it on the new rollout, that they are firm believers that student outcomes are not going to change if adult behaviors don't change. That's and they're being so straightforward about us as providers to make sure that we tell you all. We have to change the adult behaviors. And I know somebody mentioned earlier about the adults. Yeah, we care about the adults because it'll trickle down, but at the end of the day, it's about the students. So if we don't change what's happening with the adults, it's not going to trickle down to the students. And lastly, somebody mentioned about the importance of the classroom. That's where the magic happens, the classroom. If we are we're building capacity with the teachers to be able to truly internalize the lesson. So that's the question. That's where you all will come in as board trustees to ask the question to Dr. Dixon and her cabinet. Who are we partnering with? The curriculum that we adopt, was it an EMRA approved curriculum? I know that you all said you all had 1.5 million that you all partnered. That's amazing. I hear Carnegie. I can tell you that when I was a principal at an F-rated campus, we went from an F to a B, highest growth in the region, through Carnegie and Amplify, using the Texas Instructional Leadership, Dr. Paul Bambrick Santoyo. Yes, was it easy? No, it's not easy. Adults were not okay. Change is uncomfortable. But I can tell you, students were successful. So I get all happy when I hear like the terms. I know I was talking to you earlier, and it's there. It's happening. Success is not accidental. So I love what's happening at Judson.
Okay, I'll take all the negatives.
All right, I'm gonna send you the TA slides from Dr. Black and show
I agree
you
with
I
you.
didn't make it up.
Well, and Dr. Dixon, as they were talking, I looked up the LSG, and it does say that it needs to be negatively constructed. The phrase, every constraint or guardrail to state what cannot and shall not happen. So that is certainly, just for the record, I've not been a big fan of Lone Star governance, but that is definitely what they're saying.
It's gonna be very hard for me to go to
And
the
to-
school and say, you cannot do this.
No,
And to be complete transparent, the Lone Star governance, that's the TEA rollout. Us, TASB, we have our own, but I can tell you, good research is good research. I do apologize if whomever gave out the Lone Star governance to you all, because it's a lengthy, and when it's done the right way, it's game changing. But when it's rolled out, just for the heck of rolling out, for compliance and getting the money, then whomever suffers is the district as a whole.
yeah,
Well,
I think if we
it's
get to
good
dance
research.
around it, we can see how we feel about it, and I think it's something we should look at for next fall to officially.
And it's changed. You know, I've
Oh,
been in
yes.
some discussions
And right
with
now you
PA
can.
years ago about having to adjust Lone Star governance, so there's been some modifications since
Yes.
back then.
You can no longer be a provider if you don't get a 90 or above. It's a very rigorous.
Yeah, the number of people who
the
can provide it has
process-
been
yeah, it's
locked
been
down now.
locked down.
So, okay. Yes, sorry. All right, then, guardrail constraint 2 is about, oh, and I've heard this in a couple presentations, about equitable access to our programs, right? Every student, regardless of zip code, should be able to take AP classes. They should be able to participate in a CTE program. Kids should not be denied because we have wait lists. If we have the ability to increase capacity, we should not be turning away 50 or 100 kids and denying them an educational opportunity. So we need to expand capacity to get kids what they need. And then teachers reporting they have adequate resources and supports. That's how we're going to measure it. Any questions on guardrail 2? And district will further refine the constraint progress measures, and the district is the one that sets the annual targets for those and what the measurement tools are.
Yeah,
The board
that's-
doesn't do that.
That's
So-
important,
Correct.
because that was my main question going through these,
Correct.
is how are they measured?
Nope,
Yeah, that's
we now
right.
turn that over to district, and they come up with the annual targets, and then we'll add it to the monitoring calendar, though, because we will monitor these things. But they set what those annual targets are, because they know what the measurement tool is.
So we're defining equitable access clearly somewhere, and we're defining rigorous academic and career opportunities clearly somewhere? Because that's a
Correct, because
rigorous.
equitable access is defined down there as students not being able to enroll in the thing that they want. And rigorous academic is defined there as AP dual credit, on-ramps, other advanced opportunities, CTE programs of study. Yes, those are defined in the CPMs. We can, equitable.
We can.
It has nothing to do with DEI.
Okay. Yeah.
Equity
Some of the districts, some of our,
equity is
some
out,
of the
but
districts and the
equitable is
conversations
not.
have been, let's take the word equity out of like
That's why-
handbooks and
Oh, I
everything.
agree. No,
just
that's
to
why the word
prevent any
equity
of
is
the
not in there.
confusion.
Equitable.
So I just want to make sure that that's not something we need to pay attention to when we are setting these. So.
And thanks for bringing that up, because we're learning all sorts of
Even on our end.
weird new rules.
We say instead of saying equitable, we say tailored academic opportunities.
So, Dr. Saunders, is this goal measurable? Do you see clear ways to measure this goal? Or you're working on it?
Well, it is. So 2.1, they're going to measure how many kids are enrolled in AP dual credit on-ramps, right? And they're going to figure out what the baseline is, and then they're going to figure out the annual targets of how many more kids we're going to try and get into those classes each year. And then they're going to figure out the baseline for the CTEs, how many kids are in CTE courses, and what those increases should be each year.
So the difference between this and the goals that we saw earlier is we did not attach baseline information for this yet. That's the only difference. So yes, it is measurable, we just don't have the baseline components plugged
To
in.
measure to?
Yes, ma'am.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's going to be.
and in complete transparency, it'll be up to you all to, because you guys are the experts on it.
Yeah, because we're trying to move as fast as we can because kids are already back at school, but like, it also is a slow-moving vehicle because people are on campuses all day. So, and that's where y'all need to be. So I appreciate y'all being able to squeeze in some midnight hours trying to get done what we already did get done. All right, guardrail 3 is about finance and operations. So we've kind of already talked about how we were going to measure those, looking at the same things we've always looked at, which is our fund balance, our expenditures, payroll ratio, and then facility utilization. Those are the same metrics we've used in the past to see if we are being financially and operationally efficient. And we'll set some, district will help set some benchmarks for those for annual targets. And then 4 is about our staff. And again, this is a lot of the things you've already started with already, which is having certified teachers. We've already talked a lot about TIA and ensuring we can get massive amounts of TIA certified teachers, because we're measuring that Teacher retention for Mr. Macias, had to put that on there, because once we get this certified cadre of teachers, then we want them to stay, right? Like, there's some people who need to float away right now, but once we get that cadre of people together, then that is the group that we want to retain. And then new teachers staying 3-year retention, that's a lot of what districts are looking at, because when you get into teaching, if you are supported by your campus, mentor teachers, grade level teams, if people are digging out after their first year of teaching and digging out of your district, probably didn't feel too supported, because they just finished an entire career change or a college degree and they're digging out already. So watching the new teacher 3-year retention rate is something a lot of the other districts have been using to measure this. So any other questions on or comments or changes to Guardrail 4?
Had just one on 3.
Go ahead.
I guess I'm going to assume that if the superintendent has some financial needs to meet the district long-term goal, she'll come to the board. So that, because I saw a possible conflict, its ability to achieve board student outcome goals. So if the superintendent feels there's something needed that might be a stretch or something, they'd have to work it out with the board, right? Okay.
Well, yes, if there was a staffing or a financial goal that related to one of the goals, the targets, let's say we did decide that the do not meets people, we just don't have enough. We've got to refocus our energy, but we don't want to take it from this. Yes, I think that's what that means.
Yeah, if you need $100,000 worth of tutoring and you need to dip into fund balance to do it, then you come to the board and you say why that's better for student outcomes.
Because you tied it to that. You tied the staffing and the money and the operational decisions to the goals.
So you see that?
I do, I do.
Yeah, and this is what a lot of districts are seeing right now, which is them spending into oblivion, not just Judson, lots of districts we can name, whose superintendents are just spending money till they get to the point where there's no money left for the student outcomes. And then when they do come and want $100,000 for tutoring, down in the valley, there's one that's, I think they got less than 30 days of fund balance left. It's like, well, no, now you can't take anything, you can't have anything, and that is now negatively impacting student outcomes because of the negative financial decisions you made leading up to that. So, and lots of people in that situation.
I'll tell you where that's going to come tough here is in about January. When y'all start doing the budget and staffing projections based on current enrollment. That's where you're gonna have to, sometimes you gotta make financial decisions and staffing decisions. This is gonna force you to look at what goal is that gonna impact.
Yep.
If we don't do this, what's gonna happen with this?
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
So, I mean, it'll be tough.
Okay, any other questions on the guardrails? Otherwise, we already talked through parts of this as we went through this. So when goals and all of this, assume we're going to vote and assume it's approved, then I'll go over to the district part first. We already talked about they're going to figure out what the measurement instruments are for those GPMs and CPMs. They are going to develop the district-wide annual targets for the GPMs and CPMs. Then they are going to work with, they're going to start working on their district improvement plan because they've got now the goals that need to all be aligned within there.
Correct.
Then they're working with their campuses for their campus improvement plans, all aligned with the same student goals, same guardrails, all the measurements that we are using. Those will then come over to the board because the board will approve the district and campus improvement plans. Then they come up with their action plan. Then the superintendent has to execute. We've set what the outcomes are, and then you figure out how to do that. And some of that will be in a district improvement plan. It might be on memorandums of expectation to employees. It's going to be on the T-Test BOI memos that you are doing. There's lots of different ways the superintendent then will communicate and execute her action plan and the staff's action plan on how to achieve those. And then the board will develop, especially once we have all the measurement instruments, we'll work together to develop the monitoring calendar. We'll bring that back to the board, and then that'll drive our agenda, and then we're going to monitor progress. Any other questions? I would like to make a motion and actually pass this tonight, but I'll entertain any additional questions or comments. No, everybody's looking tired. All right, so I'm going to move that we approve the student outcome goals, guardrails and constraints, goal progress measures, and constraint progress measures as presented with adjustments as discussed. Okay. Motion by Ms. Ryan, second by, I'll give it to Ms. Jones. She did more talking tonight. So we have a motion for that.
Can
And
I have a discussion?
go ahead, sir.
So I'll be supporting this measure today, as I mentioned earlier. My only reservation is the action plan to ensure that we can make these goals. So I'll be looking to Dr. Dixon for some additional input. I'll be looking to spend some money, so I expect that the resources will encompass the need for funding, because I don't think it just can happen because you tell somebody you got to do it. So I'll look for your input on that, but just we'll circle back on that. But that would be my only request.
Go ahead, Ms. Stanford.
I assume these are things that, as we move forward, if we feel a need to tweak or adjust, we can, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, as we go through some of these, especially as district digs into the goal progress measures and the constraint progress measures, there's probably more stuff I don't think that we measure, because I don't know everything y'all do. So we may especially tweak those a little bit, but we never know when things happen, where things need to be adjusted. So.
Well, I do like the aggressive. I guess that's a matter of opinion if it's aggressive or not, but
Just get it done.
I like that.
Okay, seeing no other discussion, you're all going to find your little clickers, and we are going to proceed to vote. All right, motion passes 7-0. Before we adjourn, just, Dr. Dixon, thank you so much to your staff. Like, that was 80-something slides of, it's data in a way I've never seen presented in this district before. And it was honest, and it was transparent, and it faced what we're facing head on, because we're a team all facing it together, right? And we can't be on the ground every day teaching math. I know somebody asked and said, why am I not subbing down at Kirby? Trust me, if Dr. Dixon would let me and my expired math certificate would be down subbing at Kirby, I would. The law says I can't, right? But no matter what, we are all one team working for this together, and the district team is working with the campus teams, and the campus leadership is working with the teachers, and the bus drivers are bringing kids to school, and the cafeteria workers are feeding them, right? So we are all in this, but thank you so much to your staff for all the hard work, because I know there's a lot going on in our campuses right now, fires and gas leaks and everything else. Oh my, so thank you guys for putting this together. I feel like we're walking into this year knowing more than we've ever known about our district academically. And that makes me feel in a good place that as we move through these next board meetings, these conversations are going to be so much more enriched because we're all starting on the same baseline. So anything else before
No, they started at 6 this morning.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and had our principals all day, and then Carnegie all afternoon, and a board meeting all night.
I know.
So,
Well,
thank you.
I just feel for the sake of recognizing this, for the Dr. Mackey of the world, and Dr. Montoya, and Dr. Ball, and Dr. Fields, we've had these discussions, and it is appreciative to have this fresh perspective as well. So I want just to speak that into existence, because again, this is not the first time we've ever talked about this stuff, but we do, and I personally appreciate all the hard work you've done as well. Thank you.
All right, there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned at 9:02 p.m.